Tonight, we're diving into the scariest, most quietly unsettling mysteries of the wizarding world. The ones that were never fully explained, only whispered about and set aside. And if you feel like it, you might leave a comment telling us how many nights you have fallen asleep to these gentle stories. For it is always lovely to know that you are there. Settle in now, let your shoulders soften, and let the room around you grow dim and warm. There is nothing here that can reach you, only a slow and even voice moving through old shadows that have long since gone still. If these long, gentle tales bring you rest, you may wish to subscribe, so more of them can quietly find you on the nights to come. That is the only small thing I will ask of you before we begin. We are going to look at frightening things tonight, and yet we are going to look at them softly, the way you might study a strange old shape in a dark room and slowly realize it is only a coat upon a chair. Over the next 20 chapters we will wander, without haste, through the darkest corners of a world of magic, the cold creatures that feed on happiness, the archway that whispers though no wind stirs it, the sleepers beneath a black lake, a soul torn apart by the worst magic ever made, a serpent that slept for 1,000 years beneath a school, and the quiet truth that waits, in the end, at the close of every story. You do not need to solve any of it, and none of it can touch you where you are. Let it move through you like a slow tide, and let each old fear grow smaller and softer as it passes, until it is only a story, and you are only warm, and slowly, gently, drifting down toward rest. Somewhere in the world, in the places where the light has always been thin, there is a kind of cold that has nothing to do with the weather. It does not come from the wind or the sea or the turning of the year. It comes instead from creatures so old and so quiet that no wizard has ever been quite certain where they began. They are called Dementors, and of all the beings that move through the hidden world of magic, they are perhaps the least understood and the most gently feared. Tonight, we will draw close to them slowly, the way one might approach a shadow at the far end of a long room, curious rather than afraid, and we will let the mystery of them settle over us like a heavy quilt on a winter night. No one truly knows how the Dementors came to be. This is the first strange thing about them, and one of the reasons they belong so completely to the unsolved corners of the wizarding world. There is no tidy story of a witch who conjured the first one, no famous spell that called them into shape, no name of a maker written down in any book that has survived. They seem instead to have always been there, gathering in the damp and lightless places the way frost gathers on a window pane, or the way mold spreads in a cellar no one has opened in years. Some among the very old wizarding families whisper that Dementors were never made at all, that they simply grew, quietly and without being noticed, in the darkest folds of the earth, wherever sorrow and despair had pooled and gone still. Whether that is true, no one can say. The knowledge, if it ever existed, was lost so long ago that even the wisest can only wonder. What is known is what they do, and even that is spoken of softly, because it touches something very deep in every living thing. A Dementor feeds not on the body, but on happiness itself. Wherever one drifts near, the air grows colder, and a thin frost creeps across whatever water lies nearby, and the light seems to pull back as though ashamed. And into that cold the Dementor reaches, not with hands exactly, though it has a kind of hand beneath its ragged hood, but with a slow and patient hunger. It draws out warmth. It draws out every good and gentle thing a person carries within them. The memory of a summer afternoon, the sound of a loved one laughing, the small, quiet comfort of a familiar room. All of these are gathered up and drawn away, until what remains is only the cold, and the worst of a person's memories rising up to fill the empty space. It is a terrible thing, and yet there is no cruelty in it. Not really, for a Dementor has no malice the way a person might. It does not hate, it does not choose. It simply takes, the way cold takes heat, without thought and without pause, because that is the whole of what it is. To be near one for too long is to feel that one may never be warm or glad again, that all the good things were only ever borrowed and are being quietly returned to the dark. And this, more than any claw or fang, is why the wizarding world has always kept the Dementors at arm's length, and has spent so much of its long history simply learning how to hold them off. For a very long time, the Dementors drifted where they pleased, and the wizards who came upon them learned only to flee. But there came a day, many centuries ago, when the Ministry of Magic decided that these creatures, so unwanted everywhere else, might be given a single purpose and a single place. Far out in the cold gray waters of the North Sea stood a lonely island, and upon that island stood a fortress. And within that fortress, the wizarding world had chosen to keep its most dangerous prisoners. The place was called Azkaban, and it was there, to that island where hope had already grown thin, that the Dementors were drawn, and there that they were allowed to stay. They became the guards of Azkaban, though guards is perhaps too warm a word for what they were. They did not carry keys or walk the corridors with lanterns. They simply gathered, hundreds of them, gliding slow and hooded through the salt air, and their presence alone was the whole of the prison. No wall could hold a clever witch so surely as the despair the Dementors pressed upon every soul within those stones. The prisoners of Azkaban did not need chains. They lived instead inside their own worst memories, made to feel them over and over, day upon day, with no warmth to soften them and no happy thought left to hold on to. It was said that many simply faded there, growing quiet and hollow, until at last they were gone. Whether it was ever right to build a prison out of despair itself is one of those questions the wizarding world has debated in low voices and never truly answered. For many years it was simply the way of things, accepted the way one accepts the cold of winter. Only later, in gentler times, did some begin to wonder whether such creatures should ever have been given charge of any living person, and whether a punishment that hollows out the soul is a punishment at all, or something far stranger and sadder. The Dementors, for their part, cared nothing for the debate. They stayed because there was warmth to be found there, and they knew nothing else to want. And yet, for all the cold they carry, the Dementors are not without an answer. And this is the most comforting part of their long and shadowed story. For the wizarding world, over its many centuries, discovered a shield against them, and it is a shield made of the very thing they hunger for. It is called the Patronus, and it is among the most beautiful magic a witch or wizard can learn. To cast it, one does not reach for anger or for strength. One reaches instead into memory, and finds there the single happiest thing one has ever known, some moment of pure and uncomplicated joy, and holds it in the mind until it fills the whole of one's being. And from that memory, if it is held closely enough, there rises a shining silver form, bright as moonlight and warm as a hearth, that comes between the caster and the cold. The Dementors cannot bear it, for it is made of everything they can never have, and they draw back from its light and let the darkness thin. There is something wonderfully fitting in this, and something worth carrying into sleep. The oldest and coldest of the world's shadows is turned away, not by force, not by fear, but by a happy memory held gently and steadily in the mind. The Dementor takes joy, and so joy, remembered and cherished, becomes the very thing it cannot pass. A person need only close their eyes and find the warmest moment they own, and hold it and the cold must keep its distance. So we leave the Dementors where they belong, far out on their gray island, drifting slow above the cold water, patient and hooded and old beyond the reach of memory. They are a mystery still, their beginnings lost, their nature never fully mapped. A chill that the wizarding world learned to name and to hold at bay, but never to fully explain. And that is all right. Not every shadow needs to be chased into the light. Some can simply be let alone, understood well enough to be kept at a distance, while we turn our thoughts instead toward the warm. For tonight, there is no cold near you. There is only the soft weight of the blankets, the quiet of the room, the slow and steady rhythm of your own breathing. Whatever the Dementors are, wherever they came from, they are far away, and they cannot reach the small and gentle happiness of this moment. Hold to it the way one holds a Patronus. Let it shine quietly at the edge of sleep, and let the rest of the world grow soft and far, and let yourself drift down into warmth where no cold can follow. Far beneath the streets of London, deeper than the trains and the pipes and the foundations of the old buildings, there lies a part of the Ministry of Magic that few wizards ever see and fewer still understand. It is called the Department of Mysteries, and everything about it is meant to remain uncertain. The witches and wizards who work there are known only as unspeakables, for they do not speak of what they study, and what they study is nothing less than the great unanswered questions of existence itself. Time and thought and love and the space between the stars, all of these are kept in that quiet department, each behind its own door. But of all the rooms in that hidden place, there is one that draws the mind back again and again, one whose mystery has never been solved and perhaps never can be. Tonight, we will walk toward it slowly and stand at its threshold and simply wonder. The room is large and dim and shaped like a great amphitheater, with stone benches descending in rings toward a sunken floor at its center. It is very old, older than most of the ministry above it, and the stone has the worn softness of something that has been standing quietly for a very long time. There is a hush in that room, unlike any other. The kind of hush one finds in the oldest places, where sound itself seems reluctant to travel. And at the very bottom, upon a raised stone dais, stands the thing that gives the room its whole strange gravity. It is an archway, simple and ancient, made of pale weathered stone. And hanging within the arch, drawn across the empty space between its pillars, is a veil. The veil is a thin and tattered thing, black or perhaps the deepest gray, worn soft with the passage of ages. And here is the first of its quiet wonders, the small detail that has puzzled every wizard who has ever come near it. The veil moves. It stirs and sways and ripples gently, as though a breeze were passing through it, as though a window somewhere had been left open to the night. And yet there is no window in that deep and sealed room. There is no wind so far beneath the earth. The air is still everywhere else in the chamber, undisturbed, heavy with age. Only the veil moves, softly and endlessly, brushed by a breath that comes from nowhere at all, or from somewhere no one has ever been able to name. Those who draw near the archway describe something stranger still. As they climb down the stone benches toward it, as they come close enough to feel the cool stone of the dais beneath their hands, they begin to hear voices. Not loud voices, not words that can be caught and understood, but a faint and constant murmur, as though a great many people were speaking very quietly just on the other side of the veil, just beyond the reach of hearing. Some who have stood there swear that the voices are gentle, even inviting, and that the longer one listens, the harder it becomes to step away. Others hear nothing at all, only the deep silence of the room, and cannot understand what their companions mean. seems the archway speaks only to some, and no one has ever discovered why, or whose voices those truly are, or whether they are voices at all rather than some echo of the mind itself. For the unspeakables have studied this archway for centuries, and they have never learned where it leads. This is the heart of the mystery, and the reason the veiled arch belongs among the deepest unanswered questions of the wizarding world. They have measured it and watched it and written down all that can be written down, and still the essential thing escapes them. They do not know who built it, or when, or for what purpose. They do not know why it stirs without wind. And above all, they do not know what lies on the far side of that thin and drifting cloth, whether it is a place or an absence, or something for which there is simply no word. It stands there, patient and silent in the middle of the room, devoted to the mysteries of death, and it keeps its secret as it has kept it for age upon age. There is a sorrow woven into the story of the archway, and it must be told gently. For not everyone who has come near the veil has been able to keep their distance. It is understood among those who study the room that the archway is a threshold one may cross, but never uncross. Once, in a night of great turmoil, a man named Sirius Black stood before that dice. He was a brave man and a kind one beneath his roughness. A man who had known more than his share of grief and imprisonment, and who had at last found his way back to the few people he loved. And in the confusion of that night, as spells flew through the dim amphitheater, he was struck, and he fell backward, and the tattered veil received him and swung softly closed behind him. He did not stumble through and out the other side. He did not reappear. He simply passed beyond and was gone, and the veil went on stirring as it always had, as though nothing at all had changed. Those who saw it could not fully believe it, for there was no wound they could tend, no body they could reach, only the quiet arch and the drifting cloth and the murmur of voices that would not resolve into words. And this is perhaps the gentlest and the most haunting thing about the archway. It does not seem to destroy. It seems only to lead somewhere else, somewhere out of reach, a door standing open between one side of things and another, through which one may go, but from which none return. Whether what lies beyond is an ending, or a beginning, or simply the next room in a house far larger than the living can see, the veil does not say. The unspeakables handle it not as a horror, but as the deepest of their studies. They do not fear it, exactly. They approach it the way one approaches any great and ancient thing, whose meaning has slipped beyond memory, with care and with patience, and with a quiet acceptance that some doors are meant to be studied rather than opened. They keep the room hushed, they let the veil stir, and they go on wondering, generation after generation, adding their small observations to the long, unfinished record, never once coming to an answer that would let them rest. Perhaps that is as it should be. There is a comfort, strange and soft, in a mystery that stays a mystery, in a door that no one has forced open and no one ever will. The archway asks nothing of us tonight. It simply stands there in its dim and ancient room, far below the sleeping city, its veil rising and falling like the slow breathing of something very old and very calm. The voices murmur on, gentle and indistinct, neither calling nor warning, only present, the way the sound of distant water is present in a quiet house. And so, we leave the veiled arch to its long and patient watch, and we let its whisper fade into the greater quiet of the night. Whatever lies beyond it is not a thing to fear tonight. It is only one more of the world's soft, unanswered questions, kept safely underground, studied by careful hands, harming no one who does not draw too near. You are far from that room, warm and still and safe, and the only threshold before you now is the gentle one between waking and sleep. Let the murmur of the veil become the murmur of your own slowing thoughts. Let the stone room grow dim and distant, and let yourself drift softly toward the far side of this quiet hour where rest is waiting. There are places in the world where the water lies so still and so dark that it seems to hold no depth at all, only a black and perfect stillness that gives nothing back. And in the oldest and darkest tales of the wizarding world, it is beneath such water that the inferi are said to sleep. They are among the strangest of all the shadowed things in the great book of magic, and among the most misunderstood. And tonight we will look at them softly and steadily, and let the fear that usually surrounds them fall away, so that what remains is only a quiet and sorrowful wonder. The first thing to understand about the inferi, and the thing that makes them so much less frightening once it is truly grasped, is what they are not. They are not ghosts. A ghost is the faint silver imprint of a person who once lived, a presence that lingers on with some memory of who it was, that can drift and speak and remember. The inferi are nothing like that. Neither are they alive, not in any way that matters, for there is no breath in them, and no warmth and no beating heart. They are something in between, and it is that in-between nature that has always unsettled the wizarding world. An inferius is a body, once a living person, that has been touched by dark magic and made to move again. It walks, and it obeys, but there is no one inside it. It is empty as a glove is empty, a shape without a soul, a thing bewitched rather than a being awakened. This is important, and it is worth holding on to, because it means there is nothing truly to be pitied in the inferi themselves, and nothing truly to be feared. They have no will of their own. They have no thoughts, no memories, no hunger, no hate. They do not lie in wait out of cruelty, for cruelty requires a mind, and they have none. They are more like puppets than like monsters, and the only thing that ever moves them is the will of the dark wizard who made them. Left alone, an inferius simply stays where it is placed, still and silent beneath the water, sleeping a sleep that is not really sleep, waiting for a command that may never come. There is a deep sadness in that, the sadness of a body used for a purpose it never chose. But there is no menace in it, no thinking thing behind the pale and quiet face. For a very long time, the inferi were spoken of only in the darkest chapters of wizarding history, in the times when cruel and powerful witches and wizards sought to spread fear. It is a terrible magic to raise them, a magic that most who study such things will not touch, for it treats the dead as tools rather than as people to be laid gently to rest. In the darkest of times, when a certain great and terrible wizard rose to power, the very rumor of inferi was enough to make whole villages bar their doors, for it was said that he had made an army of them somewhere in the shadows. Whether that army was as vast as the fear suggested, no one ever truly knew, for fear has a way of multiplying what it cannot see. But the dread of the inferi was real, and it belonged to an age when the world felt very dark indeed. The most famous account of them comes from a place hidden far from any village, a cave carved into a black cliff above a cold and restless sea. In the depths of that cave lay a great underground lake, its water still and utterly black, so dark that no light seemed able to pierce it. And beneath that water, resting in their hundreds, lay the inferi, pale and quiet, sleeping until they should be called. It was to that lake that a very old and very wise wizard named Albus Dumbledore once came, together with a young wizard named Harry, on a night when they sought something hidden there by dark hands. And it was there that the inferi were roused, rising slowly from the black water, their pale forms breaking the still surface, reaching not out of malice, but out of the old command laid upon them long before. It should have been a moment of pure terror, and in a lesser telling it would be. But look closer, gently, and the truth of the scene is sadder and softer than fear allows. Those rising figures had no thought of the two who stood before them. They knew nothing of the cave, or the night, or the men they moved toward. They were only bodies, obeying an instruction, drawn upward by a will not their own. There was no anger in them, no delight, no cruelty, only the terrible obedience of things that cannot choose. And the two wizards, brave and steady even then, did not answer the Inferi with fear, but with the one thing the Inferi cannot abide. For the Inferi have a weakness, and it is the gentlest and most fitting weakness imaginable. They are creatures of cold and dark and still black water, and so they cannot bear warmth, and they cannot bear light, and above all they cannot bear fire. A wizard who keeps their wits, who remembers that the pale figures are only bewitched and not truly alive, has only to call up flame, and the Inferi shrink back from it at once. They retreat from the brightness and the heat, sinking down again beneath the surface, returning to the dark and the stillness where they rest. Fire drives them back, and light holds them at bay, and this is why they belong to the deep and lightless places, for they cannot follow anyone into the warmth of the world above. There is something quietly reassuring in that, and worth carrying towards sleep. The things that trouble us in the dark are so often like the Inferi, pale and cold and empty of any real power, given all their weight by fear alone. And the answer to them is not to fight them, but simply to bring in a little light, to remember what they truly are, to see that beneath the frightening shape there is nothing that thinks or wills or means us harm. A single flame, a single steady breath, and the cold things sink back into the deep where they belong. So we may look upon the Inferi now without dread, and even with a kind of gentle sorrow. They are not villains, but victims, bodies once alive, once loved perhaps, once part of the warm world, now emptied and set to a purpose they never asked for. The kindest thought one can hold for them is that somewhere the true person, the soul that once dwelled within, has long since passed on to wherever souls go, far beyond the reach of any dark command, resting truly and completely in a way the pale shape below the water never will. What remains in the black lake is only the leftover shell, and even that will one day crumble back into the stillness and be gone. Let the black lake grow calm again in the mind, its surface unbroken, the pale sleepers settled once more beneath it, undisturbed and undisturbing. There is no cave near you tonight, no cold water, no dark command. There is only your own warm room and the soft light behind your closed eyes, and the steady quiet of a night that means you nothing but rest. The Inferi cannot reach the warmth, and you are all warmth now, wrapped and safe and settling deeper with each slow breath. Let the water go still. Let the light stay soft. And let yourself sink, gently and completely, not into cold, but into the deep and restful calm of sleep, where nothing pale is waiting and nothing needs to be feared. Long ago, in the way that all the best stories begin, there were 3 brothers who set out together upon a lonely road at the close of the day. They were wizards, these 3, and skilled ones, and they were traveling through a wild and empty country as the light was fading toward dusk. In time their road brought them to a river, wide and deep and treacherous, too dangerous by far to cross on foot. But these were clever brothers, and rather than turn back, they simply raised their wands and drew a bridge out of the air, a bridge of their own making, and began to walk across the water that had stopped every traveler before them. This is how the oldest and most beloved of all wizarding bedtime tales begins, and tonight we will tell it slowly, the way it was meant to be told, in the quiet hour before sleep. For as the three brothers reached the middle of the bridge, a figure rose up before them and barred their way. It was tall and hooded, and it stood between them and the far bank, and the old tale says plainly that this figure was Death. Death, the story tells us, was not pleased. For the river had claimed many travelers over the years, and these three had cheated it by their cleverness. And yet Death was cunning, and so it did not rage. Instead, it pretended to be impressed by the brothers' skill, and it offered each of them a prize, a gift of their own choosing, as a reward for having been clever enough to escape. Here we come to the deep and gentle mystery at the very heart of the wizarding world. The question that no book has ever answered, and perhaps no book ever should. Was that hooded figure truly Death itself, walking out upon a bridge at dusk to speak with three living men? Or was it only a story, a shape given to something far larger and stranger, a way for the tellers of old to make sense of things too vast to name? The tale does not say, and the wisest wizards who have pondered it for centuries do not agree. Some believe it is exactly what it seems, an account of a night when Death took a form and gave three fateful gifts. Others believe the three brothers were simply gifted wizards who made three wondrous objects themselves, and that the figure of Death was added later, the way a warm imagination will dress a plain truth in something grander. We may hold both possibilities gently and choose neither, and let the mystery stay whole. The first brother, who was proud and warlike, asked for a wand more powerful than any in existence, a wand that would win every duel for its master, a wand fit for a wizard who had cheated Death. And so, from the wood of an elder tree that grew upon the riverbank, the figure fashioned a wand and gave it to him. This was the Elder Wand, the first of the three gifts, and it would pass down through the long ages of wizardkind, always sought, always fought over, always carrying a shadow with it. For a wand that never loses draws to itself all those who wish to never lose, and such men rarely rest, and rarely let others rest either. The first brother took his prize and boasted of it, and his story did not end in peace. The second brother, who was arrogant in a different way, wished to humble Death still further, and so he asked for the power to bring back those who had died. And the figure took a small stone from the riverbank and gave it to him, and this was the resurrection stone, the second of the three gifts. It could call the dead to return, or so it seemed, and the second brother hurried home to summon back a girl he had once hoped to marry, who had died before her time. And she came to him, or something of her did, quiet and lovely, and yet not truly there, belonging now to another world and longing to return to it. His story, too, was a sorrowful one, the story of a man who reached for what was gone and could not truly hold it, and it teaches gently that grief is not undone by force, only carried and softened and in time laid down. The third brother was different from the other two. He was humble, and he was wise, and he did not trust the hooded figure on the bridge. And so, when he was asked what he desired, he asked for something quite unlike the others. He asked for the means to leave that place and go on his way without being followed, so that Death could not track him down. And the figure, with some reluctance, drew off its own cloak of invisibility and handed it over, and this was the third and last of the gifts. With it, the third brother could pass through the world unseen, hidden from every eye, and so he went quietly on his way and lived a long and full life. And only when he was very old and content and ready did he take off the cloak at last and give it to his own son, and greet the hooded figure not as an enemy but as an old friend, and depart with it willingly, as equals, into whatever lay beyond. And here the tale grows quiet and thoughtful, For the three gifts leave us with a question we are meant to sit with rather than solve. Were they mercy, or were they a snare? The first two brothers received exactly what they asked for, and each was undone by it, not by any curse, but by their own reaching, their own refusal to accept what could not be changed. The third asked for the humblest thing, and was left in peace, and met his ending gently when at last it came. Some say this proves the gifts were a trap all along, and that death gave the proud brothers the very things that would ruin them, knowing they would not use them wisely. Others say the gifts were neutral, neither kind nor cruel, and that what mattered was only the heart of the one who held them. The tale, as all the best tales do, lets us decide. Together these three objects came to be called the Deathly Hallows, and the legend grew that whoever gathered all three and united them would become the master of death itself. For long ages wizards searched for them, some out of curiosity, some out of a deeper and darker hunger to escape their own ending. And yet the truest reading of the old tale is not about power at all. It is about acceptance. The brother who mastered death was not the one with the unbeatable wand, nor the one who called back the dead, but the one who lived his life fully, and then, when his time came, walked on without fear. To master death, the tale seems to whisper, is not to defeat it, but to make peace with it, to greet it as the third brother did, unafraid and unhurried, an ending accepted rather than an enemy fled. And so we come back to the question we began with, and we find, gently, that it does not need answering. Whether the hooded figure on the bridge was truly death, or a force wearing the shape of a person, or only a story dressed as one, the lesson it leaves is the same, and it is a soft and comforting one. There is no shame in an ending. There is no terror in it, for those who do not run. The frightening thing is only ever the running, the reaching, the refusal to let go, and even that the tale forgives. So let the three brothers walk on into the dusk of their story, the first to his boasting, the second to his sorrow, the third to his long and peaceful life. Let the river flow quietly beneath the bridge that is no longer there. There is nothing on the road tonight but the gentle close of an old tale, told to bring rest, as it has brought rest to wizarding children for 1,000 years. Let it settle over you now, warm and familiar, and let the questions it raises drift away unanswered and unworried, and let yourself sink softly toward sleep, unafraid of any ending, cradled in the quiet of a story that always meant only to comfort you. Of all the mysteries in the hidden world of magic, there is one that the wisest wizards speak of most reluctantly and most quietly, because it touches the deepest and most fragile thing a person carries. It is not a creature, nor a place, nor an object. It is a piece of magic so dark that most who study such things will not name it aloud, and it concerns the soul itself and what becomes of a soul when it is deliberately torn apart. Tonight, we will approach this softly, from a great and gentle distance, the way one studies an old wound long since healed over, curious about how it came to be, but no longer in any danger from it. To understand this darkest of magics, one must first understand something simple and true, something the whole of the wizarding world quietly agrees upon, even where it agrees on little else. The soul is meant to be whole. It is the single, unbroken thing that makes a person who they are, that holds together their kindness and their memory and their capacity to love, that keeps them warm and human from the inside. In its natural state, it rests within a person like water in a still vessel, entire and undivided, and it is meant to stay that way for the whole of a life, and to pass on whole at the end of it. Nothing in ordinary living, however hard or however painful, can split the soul. It is a remarkably resilient thing, and it wants only to remain one. But there is a way to tear it. It is spoken of as the very darkest magic there is, and the way it is done is so terrible that the details are best left in shadow, told only as much as understanding requires, and no more. The soul can be split by an act of such deliberate cruelty that it does violence to the very nature of the person committing it. Such an act works against everything the soul is for, and the strain of it, the sheer wrongness of it, causes a fragment of the soul to tear loose. And a witch or wizard versed in this darkest of arts can then take that torn piece and seal it away, hidden inside an object, so that even if their body is destroyed, that fragment lives on, anchored to the world, keeping them from truly dying. Such an object is called a Horcrux, and the making of it is the most feared and least understood magic in all the long history of wizardkind. Now here we come to the true mystery, the part that no book has ever fully answered, and the part that is far more haunting than any spell. What does a person become when they have done this? What happens, not to the fragment sealed in the object, but to the person who remains, walking about in the world with a soul now torn and incomplete? The canon does not spell it out in tidy terms, for perhaps it cannot be spelled out, but it tells us gently and unmistakably what the cost is. With each tearing, the maker grows less warm, less human, less able to feel the ordinary tenderness that binds people to one another. The soul is what makes a person whole and human, and to tear it is to give away, piece by piece, the very thing that made them a person at all. Imagine, softly, a thing meant to be one, broken into parts, and each part somehow diminishing the whole rather than merely dividing it. A person who splits their soul once is already changed, already colder, already further from the warm center of themselves. And there have been those, in the darkest corners of wizarding history, who did not stop at once. There was a wizard who tore his soul again and again, more times than any before him had ever dared, believing that the more pieces he scattered and hid, the safer he would be from death, the more impossible to truly kill. And with each tearing he lost more of what he had once been, until at last there was very little left that could be called human at all. For this is the strange and sorrowful truth at the heart of the Horcrux, and the reason it belongs among the deepest of the frightening mysteries. The one who makes them believes he is making himself stronger, more lasting, safer from the ending that comes to everyone. But what he is truly doing is unmaking himself. He trades his wholeness for a kind of permanence, and the permanence he wins is hollow, for the self that clings on is barely a self at all. His face may change, growing pale and strange, and less like a person's face. His warmth departs. His capacity for love, which was never large, withers to nothing, for love more than anything requires a whole soul to hold it. He becomes, by slow degrees, less like a man and more like a thing, a cold and grasping remnant that has purchased its endless survival at the price of everything that made survival worth having. There is a deep lesson in this, and it is a gentle one despite the darkness of its subject, and it is worth carrying softly towards sleep. The wizarding world, in telling this tale, is not merely warning against a particular spell. It is saying something true about all of us. It is saying that a person is made whole by their bonds to others, by their kindness, by their willingness to feel loss and love and grief as the price of being alive. And it is saying that any attempt to escape that price, to armor oneself so completely against loss that nothing can ever touch us, comes at a cost far greater than the loss itself. The one who cannot bear to be vulnerable, who tears away every soft part of himself to keep from being hurt, ends by having nothing left to protect. The Horcrux is the far and terrible extreme of a very human temptation, the wish to never lose anything, and it shows us from a safe distance exactly where that wish leads when it is followed all the way down. But we need not follow it. That is the comfort in this study of a wound. We can look at it and understand it and learn what it has to teach, and then step gently back into the warmth of our own whole and unbroken selves. For the soul, remember, wants only to be one. It is a resilient and quiet thing, and it holds itself together through all the ordinary sorrows of a life, through grief and disappointment and the slow letting go of the things we cannot keep. None of that tears it. It is only the deliberate, the cruel, the turning away from love itself that does harm. And that is a road no gentle heart will ever walk. Your soul, tonight, is whole. It is warm and entire, and resting easily within you, needing nothing torn away, needing nothing hidden, safe in its own quiet completeness. So we leave the darkest of magics where it belongs, far off in the shadowed corners of old and terrible histories, studied from a distance, understood well enough to be turned away from. We do not need to fear it, for fear is not the point of it. The point of it is quieter than fear. It is the simple reminder, offered gently at the close of the day, that wholeness is worth more than permanence, that to feel is worth the risk of loss, that a soul kept soft and entire is the truest treasure a person owns, far more precious than any survival bought by tearing it. Let that thought settle over you now, warm and unbroken. There is nothing to hide away tonight, nothing to seal in stone, nothing to tear or lose. There is only your own quiet self, whole and at peace, breathing slow in the dark, held together by every gentle thing you have ever loved. Let the darkness of the old tale fade into the softer dark of the room around you. Let your whole and resting soul grow heavy and calm. And let yourself drift down into sleep entire, untorn, and altogether at rest. Of all the mysteries the wizarding world keeps close, there are few gentler and few sadder than the small black stone that is said to call the dead back to those who loved them. It is the second of the three hollows, plain and unremarkable to look upon, a smooth, dark pebble no larger than a thumbnail, with a thin line etched upon its surface, the mark of the triangle and the circle and the straight stroke down the middle. Nothing about it suggests the strange power it is meant to hold. And yet, if the oldest tale is to be believed, this quiet little stone can do the one thing that all the magic in the world was never meant to do. It can reach across the space between the living and the dead and draw the departed near again. It is important to understand, slowly and softly, exactly what the stone is said to do, for the tale is easy to mistake. The stone does not bring anyone truly back to life. It does not undo an ending, nor mend a body, nor return a soul to the world it has left. What it summons is something more delicate and more sorrowful than that. Those who are called by the stone come only as forms, as gentle shapes of the people they once were, present and yet not fully present, near and yet always a little apart. They can be seen, they can be spoken with. They seem warm and real and known. But they do not belong to the living world any longer, and something in them remembers this, and quietly longs to return to the place from which they were drawn. The second brother in the old tale is the one the stone was made for, in the way the story tells it. He was the one who lost the person he loved most before her time, and when the figure on the lonely road offered him a gift, this was what he asked for. A way to reach the one who had gone. He was given the stone, and he turned it over 3 times in his hand, and she came back to him. But the tale is careful and kind in the way it explains what followed. She was there, and she was not there. She had crossed a distance that was never meant to be crossed twice, and though she looked at him with love, she was cold and sorrowful and quiet, separated from him as though a thin, cold veil hung always between them. She did not belong beside him any longer, and she suffered to be there, and in the end, the sorrow of loving something already gone grew heavier than the joy of seeing it. This is the danger the stone carries, and it is a soft danger, not a sharp one. It does not harm the body. It wounds only the heart, slowly, by giving it exactly what it asked for, and no more. For a very long time, the stone was thought to be nothing but a piece of that story, a lesson wrapped in a fable, the way old tales often carry warnings inside them. Many who heard the tale of the three brothers believed the three gifts were never truly real at all, and that the stone in particular, being the strangest of them, was surely only invented to make a point about the folly of trying to hold on to what is past. And yet, the stone was real. It had come down through the long years, hidden inside a ring, an old and heavy ring of dull gold set with a black stone, passed through generations of a proud and troubled family who had no idea what they truly held. They believed the mark upon it to be a coat of arms, a sign of their bloodline, when all along it was the mark of the Hollows themselves, worn quietly by a small stone that could call the dead. The stone came at last into the keeping of the one who would use it in the end, though not in the way its first owners might have dreamed. It had been damaged, cracked by dark and reckless magic, and it carried within it something far more dangerous than sorrow. But long after that danger was drawn out of it, the stone was hidden once more, this time inside something small and round and golden, waiting to be found at the very moment it would be needed most. And it was found on the darkest night of his life, walking alone toward what he believed to be his own ending. A young man opened that small golden thing and let the stone fall into his hand. He turned it over 3 times, as the old tale said, and the forest around him grew very still. And then they came to him, the ones he had lost, his mother and his father, who had died when he was only a baby and whom he had never truly known. The man who had been almost like a father to him in their place, gone too soon. The friend who had died protecting him. They gathered around him in the dark trees, quiet and loving, more real to him than anything had ever been. But here the tale keeps its promise and its sorrow. They were not truly alive. They were forms, gentle and warm to look upon, yet belonging to another place. They did not tremble at the cold. They walked lightly, as though the ground beneath them was not quite their ground. They spoke to him with love, and they gave him courage, and they stayed close as he walked on. Yet there was something in them of patience and distance, the manner of those who have already crossed over, and who are only lingering, kindly, for a little while, before the pull of the other side calls them home again. They were not brought back to stay. They were lent to him, softly, for the length of one lonely walk, and they were glad to give him that much, and no more. And this, in the end, is the quiet wisdom the stone seems to carry, hidden inside its sorrow. The young man did not try to keep them. He did not turn the stone over and over, again and again, trying to hold them in the world. He understood, in a way the second brother never could, that they had already gone, and that the loving thing was not to bind them here, but to let them walk beside him only until he no longer needed them, and then to let the stone slip from his fingers and fall among the leaves of the forest floor. He let it go. He did not go searching for it afterward. And there, somewhere in the deep and ancient trees, the small black stone is said to lie still, its work done, half buried in the soft earth, waiting for no one. So the mystery of what the stone truly summons is not really a mystery of dark magic at all. though it wears the shape of one. It is a mystery about grief and about how the heart wishes it could reach back and take hold of what it has lost. The stone gives that wish a form, and in giving it, shows why it can never truly be granted. The dead who are called do not come back to live. They come back only to say, in their quiet way, that they are at peace, and that the living must let them rest. What the second brother learned too late, and what the young man in the forest understood in time, is the same soft truth. Love does not end when someone goes, but it must learn, gently, to hold them in memory rather than in the hand. And so the stone lies in the earth, and the leaves cover it, and the years pass over it, and it waits without waiting, for it needs nothing and calls no one now. It is only a small dark pebble in the soil of a great forest, holding within it the strange and tender power to give the grieving a moment they can never keep. There is nothing to fear in it. There is only the soft ache of loving what has already gone, and the deep quiet peace that comes, at last, from learning to let it go. Far beneath the great castle of Hogwarts, deeper than the dungeons, deeper than the cold stone corridors where the students never go, there is said to lie a hidden chamber, sealed for 1,000 years and forgotten by nearly everyone who ever lived above it. It is a place spoken of only in whispers, in old rumors passed from one generation of students to the next, half legend and half warning. The sort of story that most who hear it never truly believe. And yet the chamber is real, and within it, for centuries upon centuries, something slept. To understand the chamber, one must go back to the very founding of the school, to a time when 4 great witches and wizards came together to build a place where young magic could be taught and kept safe. They were friends, at first, these 4, joined by a shared and shining dream. But one of them, a wizard of proud and ancient blood, came in time to hold a bitter belief that set him apart from the others. He thought that only children of long wizarding lines should be welcomed into the school, and that those born to families without magic should be turned away. The other 3 did not agree, and so, after long years of quarrel, this 4th founder left the school he had helped to build, and passed out of its halls, and was seen there no more. But before he left, so the old story tells, he did one last secret thing. Somewhere deep beneath the castle, he built a hidden room, a chamber that only his own true heir would ever be able to open. And within that chamber, he left a guardian, a creature of terrible power, sleeping and waiting, so that one day, when his heir returned, the chamber might be opened and the creature loosed to finish the work he had begun. This is the tale of the Chamber of Secrets, and for 1,000 years it was only that, a tale, told to first-year students to make them shiver, dismissed by the wise as a story with no truth in it. The guardian left sleeping in the chamber was a serpent, but no ordinary serpent. It was a basilisk, one of the most feared creatures in all the long history of magic. A great snake grown to an enormous length over the centuries, thick as an ancient tree, and longer than the corridors it hid within. A basilisk is bred by dark and secret means, and it lives for a span far beyond the lives of ordinary beasts, and it grows, slowly and endlessly, for as long as it is fed. Left in the dark beneath the school, this one had grown to a size almost beyond imagining, and still it slept, coiled in the deep, waiting through the passing of the years. What made the basilisk so feared was not only its size, nor the venom it carried, though both were deadly enough. It was its gaze. The eyes of a basilisk hold a power so terrible that to look directly into them means death, swift and certain. This is the strange, dark heart of the creature, and yet it is worth telling gently, for the way this power worked was itself a kind of mercy hidden inside a horror. Those who met the serpent's gaze by chance, through a reflection in water, through the lens of a camera, through the glass of a ghost, did not die at all. They were only frozen, held still and stone-like, caught between one moment and the next, unharmed beneath the stillness, able to be woken and made whole again. And so, in the strange way of old magic, even this most feared of creatures left, again and again, not death, but only a deep and dreamless sleep from which its victims could be gently called back. Perhaps the most extraordinary part of the whole mystery is where the basilisk lived and how close it lay to so many who never knew. For it did not stay only in the sealed chamber far below. It moved through the very bones of the castle, through the great network of pipes that ran behind the walls and beneath the floors, the wide old plumbing of a building 1,000 years old. Through these hidden passages, the serpent could travel from the depths all the way up into the school itself, gliding unseen behind the stone, close enough at times to hear the footsteps and the laughter of the students on the other side of the wall. Countless children passed their years at Hogwarts, sleeping and studying and growing, never once knowing that so vast and ancient a creature slept in the pipes beneath their feet, or moved sometimes through the dark spaces just behind the walls they leaned against. The castle kept its secret well, and the serpent kept it too, sleeping through generation after generation, dreamless and patient, disturbed only twice in 1,000 years. For the chamber could only be opened by the true heir of the founder who built it, and only such an heir could command the creature within. This is why the chamber stayed sealed for so very long. In all the centuries of the school's life, only 2 were ever able to find the hidden entrance and speak the ancient words that opened it. For both carried in them the rare gift of speaking to serpents, the same gift the founder himself had possessed. Both times the chamber was opened, and both times the serpent stirred from its long sleep and moved through the pipes. And both times, in the end, the chamber was sealed once more, and the school settled back into its long forgetting, and the story became a whisper again. What is quietly remarkable, when one steps back and considers it all, is how much of this vast secret went unnoticed for so long. A room the size of a great hall, hidden beneath a school full of the cleverest young witches and wizards in the land. A creature older than nearly everyone who walked above it. A door that thousands passed near without ever seeing. The castle held all of this within itself, calmly, the way an old house holds rooms that are never opened, keeping its oldest secret folded away in the dark below while ordinary life went on in the light above. There is something almost peaceful in the thought of it, if one does not dwell on the danger, the idea of so great a mystery sleeping so quietly, so near, for so long, and troubling no one for 100 years at a stretch. And in the end, the serpent's long sleep did come to its close. The chamber was opened a final time, and the creature that had waited 1,000 years met at last the one it could not overcome, and its long life ended there in the deep, in the place where it had begun. The chamber remains, empty now, far below the castle, its stone doors sealed once more, its passages silent. The pipes carry only water again. The walls hold no more secret than any old wall holds. And the students above go on as students always have, most of them never knowing that beneath their feet there once slept a serpent older than their grandparents' grandparents, curled in the dark, dreaming its slow reptilian dreams through the turning of the centuries. So the Chamber of Secrets, for all the fear its name once carried, settles in the end into something quieter and gentler in the telling. It is a secret in the stone, a hidden room in an old and enormous house, a sleeping thing that harmed no one so long as it was left to sleep. The castle keeps it still, folded away below, the way all old places keep their oldest rooms, patient and shadowed and calm, a mystery sealed in the deep foundations of a school that has always held more secrets in its walls than any who live there will ever know. At the very edge of the grounds of Hogwarts, where the smooth lawns give way to something older and darker, there stands a forest. It begins quietly, with a thinning of the light and a thickening of the trees, and then it deepens, quickly, into a place unlike any other on the school's land. This is the Forbidden Forest, and its name is not given lightly. For as long as the school has stood, the students have been told, gently and firmly, that they must never go there. And yet the forest is not truly a place of evil, whatever the young may imagine on dark nights. It is a place of deep and ancient wilderness, dim and green and patient. And the mystery of it is not what horrors it hides, but what wonders it quietly keeps just out of sight. To walk into the forest, if one ever did, would be to step out of the tidy world of the school and into something far older than any castle. The trees grow close and tall, their canopies knitting together far overhead until the daylight comes through only in scattered pieces, soft and green and dappled. The air is cool and still and full of the smell of moss and old wood. Sounds carry strangely there, muffled by the trees, and then suddenly clear. The snap of a twig, the rustle of something moving through the undergrowth, the far-off call of a creature that has no name most people would know. It is a hushed place, and a watchful one, and those who have spent time within it come away speaking of it not with terror, but with a kind of quiet respect, the way one speaks of something very old and very much alive. Among the oldest and wisest of the forest's dwellers are the centaurs. They are beings with the bodies of horses and the chests and faces of men and women, proud and solitary and deeply learned in their own strange way. The centaurs of the forest keep to themselves, moving in herds through the deep trees, and they do not welcome the intrusion of others into their home. But their gift, and the thing that sets them apart, is that they read the stars. To the centaurs, the movements of the planets and the turning of the constellations hold meaning, and they spend their long lives studying the night sky, watching for signs and patterns in it, reading the slow and distant story written in the heavens. They speak little of what they see, and when they do speak of it, their words are veiled and troubling, for they take the long view of things, the view of centuries rather than seasons, and what troubles the stars is rarely something the small worries of the day can touch. Deeper in the forest, in a hollow far from the paths, there once lived a very different kind of creature, and one whose tale is stranger still. This was a great spider, larger by far than any spider ought to be, grown to the size of a small elephant, with many eyes and a gentle, rumbling manner, despite his fearsome shape. He had been brought to the forest as a tiny thing long ago, and hidden there, and raised in secret by someone who loved him, and there he had lived out his long life in the deep, taking a mate and fathering a vast brood of children who spread through that part of the forest and made it their own. This colony of great spiders came to fill a whole region of the trees, and they are perhaps the one part of the forest that truly does hold danger for a wanderer, for the children of that old spider did not share his gentleness. And yet, even here, in the telling, there is something tender to hold on to, for the old spider himself was loyal and loving to the end to the one who had raised him, and his story is at heart a story of an unlikely friendship kept faithfully across a whole lifetime. The forest is home, too, to creatures of great purity and grace. Among the deep trees there move unicorns, silver white and shining, so pure and so shy that to catch even a glimpse of one is a rare and precious thing. They keep to the most hidden glades, and they trust almost no one. And there is an old and solemn belief that to harm a unicorn is among the gravest wrongs a person can commit, a stain that clings to the soul long after. The presence of these gentle, gleaming creatures in the same forest as the great spiders and the star-reading centaurs is part of what makes the place so strange and so wondrous. It holds within it, all at once, the frightening and the beautiful, the fierce and the fragile, all of them living side by side in the green shadow beneath the trees. And there are the thestrals, the dark-winged horses that live at the forest's edge, though their fuller tale belongs to another telling. They are skeletal and strange to look upon, black as the spaces between the stars, and they can only be seen by those who have looked upon death and understood it. To everyone else, they are invisible, and so for most of the school's history, they moved unseen through the forest and along its borders, drawing the carriages that carry the students, present all along yet hidden from nearly every eye. They are gentle creatures, for all their eerie shape, and their quiet presence is one more of the forest's soft secrets. Then there are the things that are only half glimpsed, the older and stranger dwellers that no one can quite name. The forest is very deep and very old, older than the school beside it, and in its farthest reaches there are said to move creatures that few have ever seen clearly, shapes at the edge of the lantern light, sounds in the dark with no source that anyone can find. It is these, perhaps, more than any spider or centaur, that make the forest truly forbidden. For the school, standing so long beside so wild a place, has always understood that there are parts of the world that are not meant to be tamed or fully known, and that the wise thing is not to conquer such a place, but simply to keep a respectful distance from it, to draw a soft line at its border, and to let what lives within it live undisturbed. And this, in the end, is the real answer to the gentle mystery of why the forest is forbidden. It is not forbidden because it is wicked. It is forbidden because it is wild, truly wild, in a way that little else in the ordered world of the school still is. It is a place that belongs to itself and to the ancient beings that dwell in it, and not to the children who live in the castle nearby. The rule that keeps the students out is not really a warning against monsters. It is a mark of respect for a place that was there long before them and will be there long after. A way of saying that some corners of the world are best left to their own deep quiet, watched over by the stars the centaurs read, and guarded by the trees themselves. So the forest stands at the edge of the grounds, dim and green and patient, keeping its wonders and its dangers folded together in the shadow beneath its canopy. The centaurs move through it, reading the heavens. The unicorns shine in their hidden glades. The great spiders keep to their hollow, and the thestrals drift along the borders, and older things stir in the deepest dark. And the castle stands beside it all, quiet and content to let the forest be what it has always been. An ancient wilderness that watches and waits, asking nothing of the world but to be left alone to grow, in the soft green silence, exactly as it always has. At the very heart of one of the most famous families in the wizarding world there lies a sorrow so quiet and so tenderly guarded that even now, after all the years have passed, no one can say with certainty exactly what happened. It is the story of a little girl, the youngest child of the Dumbledore family, whose name was Ariana, and whose short life holds one of the softest and saddest mysteries in all the long history of magic. Hers is not a tale of dark deeds or terrible creatures. It is a tale of a child who was hurt too young, and of a magic that turned inward because it was never allowed to grow the way it should have grown. Ariana was born the youngest of three, with two older brothers who loved her dearly. As a very small child she was, by every account, bright and happy and gifted, a little girl full of the ordinary sparkling magic that children of magical families show almost from the cradle. In those earliest years, there was nothing to mark her out as different, nothing to suggest the shadow that would fall across her life. She was simply a beloved youngest child in a family that, for a little while, was whole and happy in the way that families sometimes are before something breaks. The thing that broke it happened when she was only 6 years old. She was playing outside, alone, doing some small piece of childish magic, the kind that spills naturally out of a young witch who has not yet learned to hold it in. And she was seen. A group of ordinary children without magic, saw what she could do, and they did not understand it, and they were frightened by it, and their fright turned cruel in the way that fear so often does. What exactly they did to her has never been fully told, for those who knew kept it close out of grief and shame. But whatever it was terrible enough to break something deep inside her, something that could never afterward be mended. She was 6 years old, and in that one afternoon her whole life was turned aside from the path it should have taken. After that day, Ariana was never the same. The bright, natural magic that had spilled so easily out of her was gone, or rather, it did not go away at all, but instead it turned inward. Frightened so badly, so young, she seemed to decide, in the deep, wordless way a wounded child decides such things, that magic was a dangerous thing, and that she must never let it out again. And so she pushed it down and held it in, and tried with all her small strength to keep it locked away inside herself. But magic is not a thing that can be simply refused. It is part of a witch or wizard, woven into them from birth, and it must have somewhere to go. When Ariana forced hers down and would not let it flow, it did not vanish. It gathered in the dark inside her, unused and unspent, growing more and more unstable as the years went by. This is the quiet tragedy at the center of her story, and it is worth telling with great gentleness. Ariana was not dangerous because there was anything dark or wicked in her. She was dangerous only because she was so badly frightened, and because the magic she was too afraid to use had nowhere to go. Most of the time she was calm, a sweet and gentle girl, quiet and loving with the family who cared for her. But the pent-up power inside her could not be held forever, and now and then, without warning, it would burst out of her in sudden, uncontrollable ways, wild and frightening and beyond anyone's power to soothe. She could not help it. It was not her fault. It was only the terrible pressure of a great magic held too tightly for too long, breaking free the only way it could. Because of this, the family kept her hidden. They lived in the village of Godric's Hollow, and there, out of a wish to protect her and out of a fear of what others might think or do, they kept Ariana at home, away from other people's eyes. She did not go to school. She did not go out among the neighbors. She lived quietly within the house and its garden, cared for and loved by her family, but shut away from the wider world. It was done out of love, and out of fear, and out of a helpless, not knowing what else to do, for there was no cure for what had happened to her, and no name, in those days, for what she had become. For in truth, the wizarding world of that time had no word for Ariana's condition. Only much later would people come to understand that there was a name for children like her, children whose magic, repressed and denied out of fear, curls inward and becomes a wild and destructive force. Such a child was called an obscurial, and the dark, unstable magic within them an obscurus. But in Ariana's time, this was not understood. There was no word for it, no way to explain to the family what had gone wrong, no path anyone knew of that might have led her back to health. She suffered a thing that no one around her had the knowledge to name, let alone to heal, and she suffered it as a small girl who had only wanted once to do a little magic in the sunshine. Her mother cared for her devotedly, and after her mother died, her eldest brother gave up the bright future everyone had imagined for him in order to stay home and look after her. He loved her, and he tended to her, and he carried the whole weight of her care on his young shoulders, though it cost him deeply, and though a part of him, being young, quietly resented all that he had given up. This is part of the sorrow too, for love and duty and hidden bitterness were all tangled together in that house, as they so often are in families that carry a great sorrow, and the strain of it ran beneath everything, unspoken. And then, one terrible day, Ariana died. She was only 14 years old. What exactly happened has never been fully explained by any of the very few who were there. There was an argument, a fierce and bitter quarrel between the young men who loved her, spells flying wildly in a small room, and in the chaos of it, Ariana was struck and fell and did not rise again. But whose spell it was that killed her, no one ever truly knew. The three who were present each carried their own answer or their own uncertainty for the rest of their lives, and none of them could say for certain. It is perhaps the deepest wound of the whole story that even her death remained a mystery, that the ones who loved her most were left never knowing, forever, whether they themselves had been the cause of it. And so, Ariana Dumbledore passed out of the world, a girl whose magic had turned inward, whose gift had become her burden, whose short life had been shaped entirely by one cruel afternoon when she was 6 years old. She is remembered now not as a danger and not as a horror, but as one of the saddest and most tender figures in all the wizarding world, a child who was hurt too young and never given the chance to heal, a grief before the world had the word for it. Her story asks us to be gentle, above all, with the frightened and the hidden, and to remember that what looks like something dark is so often only something wounded, longing quietly, as she surely did, to be allowed at last to come out into the light. In a forgotten room somewhere, in the great castle of Hogwarts there, once stood a mirror, tall and old and magnificent, taller than the ceiling of an ordinary house, held upright in a frame of worked gold that rose in graceful curves toward its crest. Along the top of that frame, carved into the metal in letters that looked at first like some strange forgotten language, ran a single line of words, and the strangeness of those words was itself a small mystery, for they were not truly a foreign tongue at all, but only ordinary words written backward, the way a mirror itself turns everything around. Read the wrong way, they meant nothing. Read the right way, reflected as the mirror reflects. They told the reader plainly what the mirror was and what it showed, for anyone wise enough to understand. This was the Mirror of Erist, and it is one of the gentlest and most haunting enchantments in all the wizarding world. The magic of the mirror is easy to describe and very difficult to fully understand. When a person stands before an ordinary looking glass, they see themselves, their own face, their own form, exactly as they are. But when a person stands before the Mirror of Erist, they do not see themselves as they are at all. They see, instead, the deepest and most desperate longing of their own heart. Whatever it is that they want most in all the world, the wish that lives beneath all their other wishes, the mirror shows it to them, as though it had already come true. It reaches somehow past the face and into the hidden places of the soul, and it draws out the truest desire it finds there, and it shows that desire back to the one who looks, made real and shining in the glass. Because of this, no two people ever see the same thing in the mirror. Each person who stands before it sees something meant for them alone, something shaped entirely by the private wanting of their own heart. A person who is lonely might see themselves surrounded by loved ones. A person who longs for glory might see themselves crowned with honors. A person who has lost someone dear might see that person alive and near again. The mirror does not judge these wishes, and it does not explain them. It only reflects them, faithfully and without mercy, showing each soul the exact shape of its own longing. This is what makes it so strange and so tender a thing, for to look into it is, in a way, to be shown the truth about yourself, the truth of what you most deeply want, which is not always a truth a person has ever dared to face. There is a story of a young boy who found the mirror one night, alone, in the abandoned room where it stood. He was a boy who had lost his mother and father when he was only a baby, so young that he had no memory of them at all. Not their faces, not their voices. Nothing but the empty space where they should have been. When he stood before the mirror, he saw them. He saw a whole crowd of people gathered behind his own reflection, and among them a woman with kind eyes who looked exactly like him, and a man with untidy black hair and glasses standing close, smiling at him with a love he had never in his life been able to remember. He saw his family, the family he had never known, alive and warm and gazing at him with all the tenderness he had missed for as long as he could recall. For the first time he could see the faces he had longed for, without even knowing their shapes, and the sight of them filled him with a joy and a grief so tangled together that he could hardly bear to look away. And that, quietly, is where the danger of the mirror lies. For the boy came back the next night, and the night after that, drawn again and again to the glass and to the faces within it. He would sit before it for hours in the dark, gazing at the family that smiled back at him, forgetting to sleep, forgetting almost to eat, wanting nothing in all the world but to stay there and go on looking. The mirror showed him something so precious that the real world around him began to grow thin and gray by comparison, and he might have gone on returning forever, wasting slowly away before a picture of a wish, if a wise old teacher had not found him there and gently explained to him the truth of what he was looking at. For this was the warning the old wizard gave, softly, in the dark of that abandoned room. The mirror, he explained, shows neither knowledge nor truth. It shows only wanting. The people who see themselves happy in it see only what their hearts desire. And that is not the same as what is real, and it never can be. And he told the boy, kindly, that many people had wasted away before that very mirror, entranced by what they saw in it, or had been driven out of their minds, unable to tell any longer whether what the glass showed them was real or possible, or forever out of reach. That is the true danger of the mirror. It does no harm to the body, and it casts no curse. It simply gives the heart exactly what it wants to see, and then lets the heart destroy itself, slowly, longing for a thing that can never be, unable to look away. The old teacher taught the boy a gentle lesson that night, one that reaches to the very center of what the mirror means. It does not do, he said, to dwell on dreams and forget to live. The happiest person in the world, he explained, one who was truly content, could look into the mirror of SCARIEST and see nothing at all but their own ordinary reflection, their own plain face looking back, because they would want nothing more than exactly what they already had. And so the mirror is, in a strange way, a measure of the heart's peace. The more a person longs and lacks and yearns, the more the mirror has to show them, and the more it can trap them. The more a person is at peace with what they have, the less power it holds over them at all. To see only yourself in the mirror is not to be shown nothing. It is to be shown that you are, at last, content. And so the mirror closes upon its own soft mystery, and much of that mystery is never solved. No one can say for certain who first made the mirror of SCARIEST, or how such a thing was ever enchanted, or how a piece of worked glass and gold came to reach so deeply into the human heart that it could read the wish hidden at the bottom of it. It is very old, older than the memory of anyone who wrote of it, and its maker is unknown, lost somewhere far back in the long history of magic. It knows things about the people who stand before it that they do not always know about themselves, and it keeps the secret of how it knows them. That is part of what makes it so haunting a thing, a window into wanting whose own workings can never quite be seen. In the end, the mirror was moved and hidden away, kept safe and out of reach, so that no one else might waste their days before it, gazing at a longing they could never hold. And perhaps that was the kindest fate for so bittersweet a thing. For the Mirror of Erised is not truly a monster, and there is nothing in it to fear on a quiet night. It is only a gentle, sorrowful enchantment that shows each heart its own deepest wish, and reminds us, softly, that wishing is not the same as living, and that the truest peace of all is to want, at last, no more than what we already have. There are some objects in the wizarding world that seem to grow heavier the longer they are carried, though their weight upon a scale never changes at all. The locket of Salazar Slytherin was one of these. To the eye it was only a small and beautiful thing, old gold worn smooth by the centuries. Set with green stones arranged in the shape of a serpent, an ornament a person might wear against the heart and think nothing more of it. Yet within that small golden shell lay something that no ordinary jewel had ever held. A piece of a living soul had been sealed inside it, torn away and folded into the metal, and a torn piece of a soul does not simply sleep. It waits, it listens, and given time and nearness, it learns to reach out into the mind of whoever comes too close. This is one of the strangest and least understood corners of dark magic, and the canon itself never fully explains how it works. It is known only that a Horcrux, once made, becomes a kind of anchor, a small stubborn presence that clings to the world and refuses to let go. And it is known that such a fragment is not truly asleep. It carries within it something of the one who made it, a shadow of his temper, his fears, his hunger to endure. When a person keeps the object near their body for hours upon hours, day after day, that shadow begins to press outward, softly at first, like cold seeping through a closed window, until the one who carries it can no longer tell where their own thoughts end and the whispering begins. The three friends learned this slowly, in the long gray stretch of their wandering. When they came into possession of the locket at last, they found they could not simply set it aside, for it could not safely be left alone, and so they chose to wear it, each of them taking a turn, passing it from one to the next as the days went on. At first it seemed only an odd discomfort, a faint chill against the skin, the sort of thing a person might blame on the weather or on too little sleep. But the longer any one of them wore it, the more they felt it working upon them, and the more they understood that the small golden thing was not resting quietly at all. It was awake in the only way such a thing can be awake, and it was searching for the softest places in the heart of whoever bore it. For the fragment did not shout or threaten. That was never its way. It was far more patient than that, and far more clever. It found the small fears that live in every person, the quiet doubts that are usually kept folded away where they do no harm, and it drew them gently to the surface and held them there. It made the one who wore it feel more tired than they were, more alone than they were, more certain that the people beside them did not truly care and would leave them in the end. It took the ordinary weariness of a hard journey and deepened it into something that felt like despair. And because these feelings wore the shape of the wearer's own thoughts, they were terribly hard to argue with. For who thinks to question the quiet voice that seems to be their own? The one who felt it most keenly was the friend who wore it longest in the coldest part of their wandering, when hope was already thin and the days were short and the food was scarce. The locket found all of that and pressed upon it, whispering that the others thought less of him than they said, that he was overlooked and unloved, that the whole endeavor was hopeless, and that he alone could see the truth of it. It fed on his loyalty by turning it against him, and it fed on his love by making him fear that love was not returned. None of these things were true. But the fragment did not need them to be true. It needed only for him to feel them, and to feel them until they seemed like the plainest facts in the world. What makes this mystery so quietly unsettling is how gentle the method was. There was no monster in the golden shell, no face, no voice a person could point to and name. There was only a slow darkening of the mood, a steady cooling of the warmth between friends, a heaviness that settled over the mind like fog settling over still water at the end of a day. And yet, for all its subtlety, it was one of the most dangerous influences the three of them ever faced, precisely because it could not be fought with a wand or held off with a shield. It worked from the inside, in the place where a person is most alone, and there are no spells for guarding that place, except the ones a person carries in their own heart. It is worth saying softly, on a night made for rest, that the fragment's power was never truly its own. It had no life of its own to give. It could only borrow from the one who carried it, taking the small dark feelings that were already there and magnifying them, the way a still pool magnifies the gray of an overcast sky. It could not create a fear that did not already live somewhere in the wearer, however faintly. And this is a strange kind of comfort, for it means that the whispering was never a stranger's voice at all. Only the wearer's own smallest worries turned up too loud. To know that is already to begin to quiet it. And there is a greater comfort still, one the three friends came to understand only later. The power of the locket, for all its patience, was not endless, and it was not unbreakable. It lasted only so long as the object itself lasted. The whispering fragment was bound utterly to the golden shell that held it, tied to that small anchor and unable to exist apart from it. And so, its influence, however deep it seemed, was in truth as fragile as the metal that carried it. The moment the object was destroyed, the moment the shell was broken beyond mending, the fragment within had nowhere left to cling, and its cold, reaching thoughts simply ended, all at once and completely, like a lamp going dark in an empty room. The heaviness lifted. The whispering stopped. What had felt like a permanent shadow proved to be only a thing that could be put down and, in the end, put out. So the mystery of the locket that learned to whisper is not truly a mystery of terror, though it wore the shape of one for a while. It is a mystery about the strange border between a person and the objects they carry, about how a small, cold thing kept too close can dim the light in a mind that is otherwise strong and kind. It is a study of influence rather than of horror, of a slow pressure rather than a sudden strike, and of how even the darkest fragment of a soul, sealed in gold and taught to whisper, holds only the power that it borrows, and loses every scrap of it the moment its little golden home is gone. Rest, then, in the knowing of that. The whisper had no voice but the one it stole. The weight had no substance but the one it borrowed. And the three friends who carried it, tired and cold and doubting, carried it all the way to the place where it could at last be undone, and set it down, and were free of it. There are shadows in the world that seem to live inside us, that speak with our own tired voices in the small dark hours. But they are only shadows, and shadows keep no light of their own. When the thing that casts them is gone, they simply fade, and the room grows warm again, and the quiet that returns is the quiet of a mind that was never truly alone after all. Of all the strange and solemn things the wizarding world has ever done, there is one that stands apart from all the rest, spoken of in low voices when it is spoken of at all. It is not a curse and not quite a punishment in the ordinary sense, for a punishment is meant to be endured, and this is meant to leave nothing behind that can endure anything. It is called the Dementor's kiss, and it is perhaps the deepest and most sorrowful mystery in the whole of the canon, because at its heart lies a question no one has ever truly answered. When the soul is drawn out of a living person, where does it go, and what remains once it is gone? To understand it gently, one must first remember what the Dementors are, those tall gray figures that drift through cold places and drain the warmth from every heart nearby. Ordinarily, they take only what they can reach through the air, the happy thoughts, the color, the sense that anything good has ever happened or ever will again. A person who has been near them long enough is left gray and shivering and hollow, but the emptiness passes in time, and warmth returns like feeling returning to numbed hands. The kiss is something else entirely. It is the Dementor reaching not for the warmth around a person, but for the very thing that makes the person a person. It draws out the soul itself, the whole of it, and does not give it back. The body is not harmed in the way one might fear. That is the strangest part, and the part that makes the mystery so quiet and so haunting. After the kiss, the person goes on breathing. The heart keeps its steady beat. The blood stays warm, the chest rises and falls, the eyes remain open and turned toward the light. To look upon such a body from across a room, one might think the person was only resting, or lost in thought, or gazing at something far away. But there is no one there to gaze. The self is gone. The memories are gone, all of them, the small ones and the great ones alike. The name a person answered to, the faces they loved, the sound of their own childhood. Everything that made an inside to that life has been taken, and what is left is only the outside, warm and living and utterly empty. The canon offers one figure by whose fate this can be understood, and it tells his story with a certain grim quiet. Barty Crouch the Younger was a wizard who had done great wrong, who had served the darkest cause of his age and worn another man's face to do it. When at last he was caught and his deceptions unraveled, before he could be brought to any ordinary reckoning, a Dementor was brought to him, and the kiss was given. And so the man who had schemed so long and so cleverly, who had held so many secrets in his mind, was in an instant emptied of all of them. He did not die. That was, in a way, the terrible part. He simply ceased to be anyone at all, while his body remained, breathing on, holding nothing. Here the mystery deepens rather than resolves, for the canon never truly tells us where the soul goes once the Dementor has taken it. It is not said to be destroyed, for that word does not quite fit. It is not said to pass on to whatever lies beyond an ordinary death, the quiet place at the end of every life. It is drawn into the Dementor and lost, gone from the world in a way that seems different from dying, and no book explains what becomes of it after that, whether it is held somewhere or dissolved, or simply carried off beyond all reaching. The wizarding world, for all its learning, has never charted that far shore. It knows only the door, not the room beyond it. And this is why the kiss is regarded, even by those who fear little else, as the worst of all fates, worse in the eyes of many than death itself. For in an ordinary ending, whatever a person believes waits beyond, at least the soul is thought to go on to it, whole and free, carrying with it all that it was. The kiss offers no such passage. It does not send the person onward. It simply takes them out of the story while the story's pages keep turning, leaving a body to sit in the light with no one home behind its eyes. There is no memory to comfort, no self to rest, no thread of the person left to follow wherever souls are meant to go. Yet even this, on a quiet night, can be held gently rather than with dread. For the sorrow of the kiss is a sorrow felt most by those who look on, by the ones who remember the person as they were and grieve the emptiness that remains. The one who has received it feels nothing at all, wants nothing, fears nothing, suffers nothing. There is no trapped awareness inside that hollow calm, no silent crying out from within. Whatever the kiss is, it is not a torment endured. It is an absence, and an absence does not ache. If there is any small mercy folded into so grave a thing, it is that. The one who has been emptied does not lie awake in fear, does not remember the dark thing that came for them, does not mourn what was taken, for the part of them that could mourn is the very part that is gone. All the ache belongs to the living who remember, and none of it belongs to the one who has departed so completely that even departure means nothing to them now. It is worth remembering, too, that the kiss is not a common event, drifting through the wizarding world like a constant danger. It is rare, and it is guarded, reserved in the old law for the very worst of cases, and carried out only under the gravest authority, or else loosed in the chaos of dark times by creatures that no longer answer to anyone. Most who live their whole lives beneath the same sky will never come near it, will never see it, will know it only as a grim phrase spoken in a hushed corner. It belongs to the far edges of the world, not to the ordinary run of nights and days. And against the Dementors themselves, even in their hunger, there has always stood a light. The Patronus, that silver shape called up from the happiest memory a person can find, holds them back and drives them off, so that even the possibility of the kiss can be kept at a distance by warmth and by hope. The soul is not so easily taken as all that. It has its guardians, its shields, its bright defenders, summoned from love and from joy, and these have turned away the gray figures more times than can be counted. The dark is real, but it has never been unopposed. So the mystery of the man whose soul was taken away is left, in the end, as most of the deepest mysteries are, only partly answered and gently held. We know the door. We do not know the far side of it. We know that a self can be drawn out and lost, and we do not know where lost selves go. It is one of the great unanswered questions the wizarding world has learned to live beside, the way one learns to live beside a deep and quiet water whose bottom no one has ever seen. Let it rest there tonight, unhurried and unafraid. Whatever the truth of it, it lies far beyond the small, warm circle of an ordinary evening, out at the cold edges where few will ever wander. Here, in the near and gentle dark, the soul is safe, the self is whole. The memories are all still gathered close, like coals kept warm through the night. And that is enough to know, and enough to carry softly down into sleep, letting the great gray question stay where it is, far off and quiet, while the warmth stays here, near and steady and entirely one's own. Far out in the North Sea, past the last of the shipping lanes, and beyond the reach of any ordinary map, there is an island that no one visits by choice. It is small and bare and gray, a knuckle of dark rock rising from cold water that is almost always moving, and upon it stands a fortress that seems to have grown from the stone rather than to have been built upon it. This is Azkaban, the prison of the wizarding world, and it is one of the most sorrowful places the canon ever describes, not because of what is done to the people held there in the ordinary sense, for no chains are needed, and no walls alone could hold what truly binds them. It is sorrowful because of what the place is made of. Azkaban is a prison built out of despair itself. To understand it, one must picture first the loneliness of the setting. There is no shore nearby, no distant light of a town, no sound of anything living but the sea and the wind and the crying of the few birds that pass and do not land. The water around the island is deep and dark and very cold, and it stretches away in every direction until it meets a sky that is nearly the same gray, so that on many days it is hard to say where the sea ends and the clouds begin. A person standing at one of the high, narrow windows would see only that endless cold water, moving and moving, going nowhere, and would understand at once that there is no swimming from such a place and no walking away from it. The island is a full stop set down in the middle of nothing, a small gray period at the end of a very long and empty sentence of sea. Ships give it a wide berth, and even the gulls seem to hurry past it, and nothing lingers near that rock except the cold water that circles it without end. But it is not the water that keeps the prisoners, nor the thick walls, nor the height of the tower. It is the guards. For Azkaban was given over long ago to the Dementors, those tall gray figures that feed upon the warmth and hope of every living heart, and it was they who made the prison what it is. They drift through its corridors day and night, gliding past the cells without pause, and simply by being near, they draw out of every prisoner all comfort, all peace, all memory of anything good. A person held in Azkaban does not merely lose their freedom. They lose, hour by hour, the very things that make a life worth having, until only the worst of their thoughts remain. This is the true nature of the place, and it is a strange and terrible thing to think of, held gently at a distance as we hold it now. In an ordinary prison, a person might at least keep their own mind, might remember happier days, might carry within them some small warm ember to sit beside in the dark. In Azkaban, the Dementors take even that. They draw the warmth from every memory until a prisoner is left with only the cold ones, the griefs and the regrets and the very worst moments of their whole life, and these they must relive over and over, with nothing kind to set against them. To be held there is to be shut away not only from the world, but from one's own happiness, kept company only by the darkest thoughts a person owns. The history of the island is long and dim, stretching back through centuries of the wizarding world, and much of it is left uncertain in the telling. It is not entirely clear who first thought to build a prison in such a place, nor exactly how the Dementors came to dwell there and to serve as its keepers, whether they were brought or bargained with, or simply found already gathered where despair ran deep and never asked to leave. What is known is that for a very long time the fortress has stood, holding those the wizarding world judged too dangerous to walk free, and that generation after generation of guards and prisoners have passed through its cold corridors, leaving little behind but the gray weight of the place itself. There is a genuine mystery at the heart of it, and it is a quiet one. Who, exactly, first looked out upon that bleak island and decided that a prison should be made not of stone alone, but of hopelessness, that the punishment should reach past the body and into the soul? The canon does not name that first cold architect, nor explain what reasoning led the wizarding world to hand its prisoners over to creatures that feed on the mind. It is simply there, an old and settled fact, the way certain grim arrangements become old and settled and stop being questioned. And perhaps that is the most unsettling part of all, not that such a place was made, but that it was made so long ago that no one quite remembers deciding to make it. Very few who entered Azkaban ever left it unchanged, and this too is spoken of in low and wondering tones. Most who were held there for any length of time came out hollowed, thinned, their spirits dimmed in ways that did not fully mend. For a mind kept so long among the Dementors carries the gray of it long after the island is behind them. It was a rare and remarkable thing for anyone to endure that place and keep some core of themselves whole through it. And the few who managed it did so only by holding fast to a single steady thought that the Dementors could not take, some purpose or truth so quiet and so unlike happiness that the Grey Guards passed it by without noticing. That such a thing was even possible is one of the small, strange lights in the story of the island. And yet, on a night made for rest, Azkaban need not be a place of fear. Held at the right distance, it is more melancholy than menacing, a gray and lonely fact far out on cold water, the sort of sorrow one can regard with quiet pity rather than with dread. It is very far away, that island, out past everything, and it belongs to the hardest edges of the world, not to the near and gentle dark, where an ordinary evening is spent. It is worth a moment's soft sadness for all the gray griefs gathered there, and then it is worth letting go of, the way one lets go of a distant storm seen far off over the sea, knowing it will not reach the warm room where one sits. For the deepest truth about Azkaban is that its power was always a borrowed one. The Dementors could take only what despair a person already carried, and deepen only the darkness that was already there. They had no light of their own and could make none. And in the fullness of time, the wizarding world came to understand this, and to question whether such creatures should ever have been trusted with the keeping of anyone, and to imagine a prison that might one day be guarded by something other than despair. The Grey Island did not have to be the final word. Even the coldest arrangements can be looked at again, with warmer eyes, by those who come after. So let the island rest out there tonight, small and gray and far, a sad old shape on a cold sea, holding its long dim history quietly. It is far from here, and its cold cannot cross so many miles of dark water to reach a warm and drowsy mind. Here there is warmth, and here there are memories kept whole and bright, and here the worst thoughts have no power to press close, for there are no gray guards in this near and gentle dark, only the soft, settling quiet of a night that means one nothing but rest. Near the edge of the Hogwarts grounds, where the tended lawns give way to the older wildness of the forest, there lives a herd of creatures that most of the school has never seen at all. They graze in the dim clearings and shelter among the trees. They draw the carriages that carry students up from the station each autumn, and they move through the life of the castle year after year, faithful and quiet and almost entirely unnoticed, for to most eyes they are simply not there. The carriages seem to roll along on their own, pulled by nothing, and the students climb in and think no more of it. Only certain people can see the horses at all, and the reason why is one of the gentlest and strangest mysteries in the whole of the wizarding world. These are the Thestrals, the winged horses of Hogwarts, and their nature is bound up with something that touches every life sooner or later. A Thestral becomes visible only to a person who has seen death and, more than that, who has understood it, who has grasped in some quiet inward way what it truly means for a life to end. To a child who has never yet stood at that edge, the Thestrals are invisible, and the carriages appear to move by themselves. But to one who has watched someone die and let the truth of it settle into their heart, the creatures come suddenly and completely into view, and the empty space before the carriages is empty no longer. It is worth pausing over how strange and how tender this is. The Thestrals are not hidden by any spell, not cloaked or charmed or made to vanish. They are simply visible only to the grieving, only to those who carry within them the knowledge of loss. It is as though the creatures themselves are a kind of threshold, and only those who have already crossed a certain sorrow can perceive what waits on the other side. A whole classroom of students might stand in the same clearing, and some would see nothing but grass and shadow, while others, The ones who had known death would see the dark horses standing plainly among the trees, watching them back with quiet, patient eyes. To look upon a thestral for the first time can be a startling thing, for they do not resemble the soft creatures of a gentler imagination. They are lean and dark, their bodies drawn thin, so that the shape of the bones can be seen beneath the black hide, and from their shoulders spread great leathery wings that fold and unfold like those of an enormous bat. Their eyes are white and wide, and without any glint of color, and they move with a slow, deliberate grace that is unlike the bright quickness of ordinary horses. Long ago, and in many places still, they were thought to be creatures of ill omen, dark shapes glimpsed at the edges of misfortune, and people learned to fear the sight of them and to count them a sign that sorrow was near. But this old fear was a misunderstanding, and one of the kindest lessons of the canon is how thoroughly it is undone. The thestrals are not omens of doom, and they do not bring the deaths they are linked to. They are only visible to those who have already grieved, and so they are always found near sorrow, not because they cause it, but because grief is the very thing that opens the eyes to them. To blame the thestral for the loss is to blame the window for the winter it lets one see. The creatures themselves have nothing dark in them at all beyond their coloring. They are, in truth, among the gentlest beings in the whole of the forest. For those who come to know them, the thestrals prove to be loyal and patient and remarkably tender. They are steady in temper, calm under the hands of anyone who treats them kindly, and they possess a fine and dependable sense of direction, able to find their way to a place a writer only pictures in their mind, carrying them there faithfully across great distances through the dark. The herd that dwells near Hogwarts has drawn the school carriages for generations without complaint, doing its quiet work unseen by nearly everyone it serves, asking nothing, receiving little notice, and giving its steady labor all the same. There is a deep and simple faithfulness in them that has nothing to do with the dread they once inspired. Those who care for the herd find them wonderfully gentle to handle, quick to trust a soft voice and a slow hand, and content to stand for hours in the dim of the trees, needing little and giving much. They ask for no reward and expect no notice, and yet they come when they are needed and carry what must be carried, season after season, with a constancy that few creatures could match. In this they are a quiet marvel, hidden in plain sight at the very edge of a school that scarcely knows they are there at all. And so the thestrals hold within them a truth that is worth carrying softly down toward sleep, that the frightening and the gentle can share a single shape. Here is a creature that looks, at first, like something out of an old fear, thin and dark and winged and strange, and yet is in its heart as loyal and mild as any beast that ever served a kind master. The lesson of the thestral is that appearances are a poor guide to what a thing truly is, that the dark shape at the edge of the trees may be not a threat, but a friend, and that the very creature old superstition taught people to dread turns out to be patient and steady and quietly devoted. There is a comfort, too, in the way the thestrals are tied to loss. For a child who cannot yet see them, their invisibility is a kind of gentleness, a sign that they have not yet had to carry the weight of a great grief. And for the one who can see them at last, their sudden appearance is not only a mark of sorrow, but also, in a quiet way, a sign of understanding gained, of a hard truth met and held. To see a thestral is to have crossed into a deeper knowing of how life works. And though that knowing comes at a cost, the creatures that greet one on the other side of it are not cruel. They are calm, and they are kind, and they wait without judgment to carry whoever needs carrying. Picture them, then, on a still evening at the edge of the forest, the small herd standing among the darkening trees. They graze quietly, their great wings folded against their sides, their pale eyes catching what little light remains. Now and then, one lifts its head and looks out toward the castle, patient and unhurried, and then bends again to the grass. There is no menace in the scene at all, only a deep and settled stillness, the peace of creatures entirely at home in the dim green world they belong to. They have drawn their carriages and done their faithful work, and now the day is ending, and they rest as all things rest when the light goes down. Let the Thestrals stay in the mind that way as sleep draws near, gentle and dark and misunderstood no longer. They are proof that the things which frighten us at first glance are so often only waiting to be known, that a strange shape in the shadows may hold a patient and loyal heart, and that even the creatures born of loss can be tender companions in the dark. There is nothing to fear in the quiet horses at the forest's edge. There is only their steady breathing, their folded wings, their calm white eyes turned toward home, and the deep old peace of the wild green place where they have always lived, watching and waiting and asking nothing but to be allowed to rest. Among all the dark magics the wizarding world has ever known, there is one that stands out for a quality that fire is never supposed to have. Fire, in the ordinary way of things, is not alive. It spreads where it can, it feeds on what it touches, and it goes out when there is nothing left to burn, or when someone puts it out. It has no wishes and no aims, but there is a cursed flame in the canon that seems impossibly to want. It takes the shapes of living things, it chases what it means to consume, and it turns upon those who try to command it as though it resents the leash. It is called fiend fire, and it may be the single most dangerous fire in the whole of the wizarding world, precisely because it appears to have something very like a will of its own. To picture it gently, from a safe and quiet distance, one must imagine a fire that does not simply burn, but takes form. Where an ordinary flame flickers and gutters, without pattern, fiend fire rises up into shapes, great serpents of flame that coil and strike, fiery beasts that gallop and leap, birds of pure fire that wheel overhead, all of them formed from nothing but the burning itself, and all of them moving with a terrible purpose. And these shapes do not wander aimlessly. They hunt. They turn toward whatever lives, whatever moves, whatever might be caught and consumed, and they pursue it across a room with the eager single-mindedness of a hungry animal that has scented its prey. This is what sets fiendfire apart and makes it so deeply feared, held here only as a thing to wonder at rather than to dread. It is not merely hot, and it is not merely large. It is directed. It seems to seek. And whoever loses control of it, even for a moment, finds that it cannot easily be gathered up again, for the fire fights to keep spreading, growing greater and hungrier the more it feeds, until it fills whatever space it has been loosed within and reaches for whatever lies beyond. Very few wizards possess the skill to command such a flame at all, and fewer still can bring it safely to an end once it has begun. To raise fiendfire is to open a door that is exceedingly hard to close. There is a genuine and unsettling mystery in this, one the canon leaves open. How does a fire come to have something like a will? An ordinary flame is only a chemical thing, a bright event, with no inside to it, no wanting, no seeking. Yet fiendfire behaves as though something looks out from within the burning, as though the shapes it takes are not accidents of heat, but choices, as though the fire knows what it wants and moves to get it. Whether there is truly any awareness inside that flame, or whether the dark magic that summons it only lends it the appearance of hunger, the canon never says. It is one of those places where the darkness of the world runs deeper than any book fully explains, and where the honest answer is simply that no one knows. Perhaps the seeming hunger is only the shape that the dark magic happens to take, a pattern in the burning with no thought behind it at all. Or perhaps something truly stirs within that flame, some borrowed spark of wanting, gazing out from the fire it wears. The canon leaves the question standing, and so it must remain, a small, locked door among all the others. The most vivid account of fiendfire in the whole of the story unfolds within the Room of Requirement, on the day the great castle stood in its gravest peril. There, in that vast enchanted space where countless students across countless years had hidden the things they could not keep, the cursed fire was loosed, whether by mischance or by a hand that could not truly master it. And once loosed, it grew with terrible speed, rising in its serpents and its beasts, sweeping through the towering heaps of forgotten treasures, turning that quiet storehouse of 1,000 secrets into a sea of living flame. It devoured the hidden things of generations, the lost books and the abandoned keepsakes, and all the small forgotten sorrows people had tucked away there over the years, taking them all into the burning as though it could never have enough. And here, the canon reveals one of the strangest properties of fiendfire, a thing that sets it apart even from other dark magics. This fire is so fierce, so utterly consuming, that it can destroy what almost nothing else can touch. A Horcrux, that most stubborn and most guarded of dark objects, sealed against nearly every force in the world and terribly hard to unmake, can be undone by fiendfire. The cursed flame reaches past every protection and simply burns the anchor away, ending the fragment sealed within as surely as if the object had never been. This is a rare and remarkable power, and it is part of why fiendfire holds such a fearful place in the lore, for it is one of the very few things capable of unmaking what was made to last forever. Yet even fiendfire, for all its hunger and all its terrible appetite, is not beyond ending, and this is worth holding on to as the night draws in. It is exceedingly difficult to control, and only a very skilled wizard can hope to bring it under command once it has begun. But it is not truly endless. It can be halted by those with the strength and the knowledge to do so. And when it is at last brought to rest, or when it has consumed everything within its reach and there is nothing further to feed it, the shapes collapse, the beasts of flame sink down, and the fire dies, as all fires must in the end. However alive it seems, it remains a fire, and a fire, in the end, goes out. It helps, too, to remember how rare a thing fiendfire truly is. It is not a danger that lurks in ordinary corners or troubles ordinary days. It belongs to the darkest edges of magic, summoned only by those who reach for the most perilous of arts, and most who live their whole lives beneath the same sky will never see it, never come near it, never know it as anything but a fearsome word from an old tale. It is not a fire that finds people unbidden. It must be called, deliberately and dangerously, by a hand that reaches into the deep dark for it, and such reaching is rare and rarely goes unpunished. So the mystery of the fire that hunts like a living thing is left, like so many of the deepest mysteries, as a question gently held rather than firmly closed. We know what fiendfire does. We know the shapes it takes, and the terrible hunger it shows, and the rare and dreadful power it holds even over the things made to endure. What we do not know is what, if anything, truly looks out from within that flame, whether there is any real wanting in it, or only the borrowed appearance of wanting, lent by the dark magic that gives it form. It is a question the wizarding world has never answered, and perhaps never will. Let it stay a distant question tonight, described and wondered at, and set safely aside. The cursed fire belongs far from here, to a single terrible day in a burning room, to the darkest corners of a difficult time. It is not near, and it is not hungry here. Here there is only the soft and ordinary warmth of a night at rest, a gentle glow with no shapes in it and no seeking, nothing that hunts and nothing that chases. Only the still and kindly quiet of a fire that is burned low and content. And in that quiet, the strange bright terror of fiendfire grows small and far and harmless. A curious tale of a flame that seemed to think, held at arm's length and released as the mind drifts down at last toward the deep and dreamless calm of sleep. Far out along a stretch of coast that few would ever choose to visit, where the land breaks away into cliffs and the sea below is gray and endless, there is a cave that was never meant to be found. It sits low against the rock, its mouth half drowned by the tide, and for most of every day the water rises to cover it entirely, so that a person standing on the cliff above would see only the swell and the foam and never guess that anything lay behind it. It was chosen for exactly that reason. Long ago, the wizard who would come to be feared above all others sought out the loneliest and most forbidding places he could find. And this one, cold and battered and forgotten, seemed to him a fitting vault. He hid within it a small and terrible thing, a fragment of his own divided soul, and around that fragment he wove enchantments so cruel and so cunning that he believed no one would ever reach it. Yet the true mystery of the cave was never the treasure it guarded. It was the way its maker had learned to build a prison, not out of stone or iron, but out of despair itself. To enter it all, one had first to pass through the outer cave, a bare hollow of black rock where the walls seemed to press close and the air lay heavy and still. There was a hidden doorway there, sealed against ordinary passage, and it would not open to a spell or a key. It asked instead for something far older and far colder. It asked for a small offering of pain, a willing wound, a little of the seeker's own blood given freely to the stone. This was the first of the many quiet lessons the place had been made to teach, that nothing here could be taken without giving something of oneself, and that the giving would only grow heavier as one went deeper. When the price was paid, the wall drew itself apart, and beyond it lay the true heart of the cave, a vast black lake stretching away under a ceiling lost in darkness, so still and so silent that it seemed less like water than like a held breath. In the very center of that lake, small and distant, there was an island. It was little more than a low green mound of stone, barely wide enough for two people to stand upon, and upon it rested a single basin of pale, faintly glowing stone. The light it gave was thin and green and comfortless, and it did not warm the darkness so much as measure it. Everything in that place had been arranged to make a seeker feel utterly alone. The water did not lap, the air did not move. There was only the far-off glow, and the enormous quiet, and the sense of something vast and patient waiting just beneath the surface. The wizard who built it had understood, better perhaps than anyone before him, that fear grows best in silence and in solitude, and he had made both of them into walls. The lake itself was the second guardian, for it was not empty. Beneath its black and glassy surface, resting in the cold, lay a great host of the pale sleepers, the bodies that dark magic had drawn from their rest and bound to obey. They lay still as long as no one disturbed the water, and they had no thought, no will, and no purpose of their own beyond the single command that held them, to rise if any hand reached wrongly into the lake, and to pull that hand down into the depths with them. And yet, for all their number, they too were only part of the lock. They were meant to be reached only at the very end, when a seeker was already emptied and trembling, so that even their slow, silent rising would feel like the last and worst of a long series of horrors. Everything here had been placed in an order, each dread laid carefully upon the last. The basin upon the island held the cruelest enchantment of all. Within it lay a potion, dark and shifting, and it could not be moved aside, nor frozen, nor scooped away, nor pushed back with any charm. It could only be drunk. That was the whole of its terrible design. To reach what lay hidden beneath it, a seeker had to empty the basin entirely. And to empty it, a seeker had to swallow every draught of it, cup after cup, without stopping. The potion was not made to kill. It was made to break. With each mouthful it poured into the drinker a rising tide of hopelessness, of old griefs long buried and fears long outrun, until the mind was filled with nothing but sorrow and regret and a certainty that all was lost. It made the drinker relive the worst of what they had ever done or seen. It made them beg for it to end, and still it demanded to be finished, so that the very act of reaching the treasure became an act of drowning in one's own darkest memories. When at last two travelers came to that place, an old and weary wizard of great wisdom, and a boy who had already lost far more than any child should, it was the elder who chose to drink. He would not let the younger take that burden, and so he lifted the cup himself, again and again, while the potion pulled him down into torments no one watching could see. He grew weak and frightened and lost within his own suffering, and he pleaded for it to stop, and yet he did not stop, because there was a task that had to be finished and a boy beside him whom he would not fail. That was the quiet miracle at the center of so cruel a place. The cave had been built to prove that fear and despair could conquer anyone, that no love was strong enough to carry a person through so much darkness. And it was wrong. It was the boy, steadying the old man, holding the cup to his lips through his own tears, refusing to leave, who answered the whole cruel design of it. What the maker had never understood, and perhaps never could, was that loyalty is heavier than dread, and that a person will endure almost anything for someone they will not abandon. Even the final horror, the rising of the pale sleepers when the boy reached into the lake for water, was met not with the collapse its maker had counted on, but with fire and with light, and with two people refusing to let go of one another. The sleepers sank back beneath the surface where they belonged, driven down by the flames, and the lake grew still once more, as it had been for years and would be again. And in the end, the treasure the cave had guarded so fiercely, at such terrible cost, was found to be something else entirely, a small deception left by another hand, so that all that suffering had guarded, in truth, only a promise that the real work was not yet done. That is perhaps the deepest and gentlest mystery of the cave by the sea, and it is worth holding softly as the mind grows quiet. Its maker believed he had built the perfect lock, made of the one thing he was certain no one could overcome, which was despair. He filled a lonely place with silence and cold and old regret, and he was sure that fear itself would keep his secret forever. And yet every guard he laid there was defeated, in the end, not by a stronger spell or a braver heart alone, but by something far simpler and far older than any magic he knew. The cave still waits out there in the dark, its lake still and its island bare, a monument to how much fear one wizard could gather into a single hidden place. And it is also, if you turn it gently in your thoughts, a quiet proof that despair, however vast and however cold, is not the last word, and never truly was. There is a small and curious creature in the world of magic that no one has ever truly seen, and this is not because it is rare, for it is really quite common, hiding in cupboards and wardrobes and the dark spaces beneath old stairs. It is because the creature has no shape of its own to be seen. When it is left alone, tucked away in some dim and undisturbed corner, no one can say what it looks like, whether it is large or small, pale or dark, feathered or furred, or something else entirely. It waits in the shadows without form, a patient nothing folded into the black, and it only takes a shape at all when someone comes near enough for it to reach into their mind. This is the boggart, the gentle shape shifter of fear, and its whole strange nature is a mystery that turns back upon the one who faces it. For the boggart does not choose its own appearance, it borrows. The moment a person draws close, it looks quietly into the deepest part of them, past the surface of the day, and into the quiet room where each of us keeps the thing we are most afraid of. And then it becomes that very thing. To one person it might rise up as a great spider, its legs unfolding from the dark. To another it might take the shape of a towering figure, or a cold and hooded creature that drains all warmth from the air, or a serpent, or a full and staring moon, or something far smaller and more private that only that one person would understand. Two people could stand before the same boggart and see two entirely different terrors, and both would be right, because the creature is really only a mirror wearing the face each of them dreads most. It has no thought of cruelty in this. It simply does what its nature bids, the way water flows downhill, reaching always for the shape of the nearest fear. Because of this, the boggart has always been a puzzle to those who study magical creatures. It cannot be described in a book the way an ordinary beast can, with its color and its size and its habits set down plainly, because it has no fixed self to describe. What is known of it comes only from the shapes it wears and the places it likes to hide. It favors darkness and enclosure, the shut and forgotten spaces of a house, the wardrobe no one opens, the cupboard pushed against a back wall, the gap beneath the floor. It settles into these places and waits, sometimes for a very long time, until at last a door is opened and a face appears, and the small dark thing within stirs and reaches out and becomes whatever that face fears. In this way, a boggart can lie hidden in a home for years, harmless and unnoticed, until the day it is finally disturbed. Those who keep old houses have long known the small signs of one, though they do not always understand what they are seeing. A wardrobe that rattles faintly when no one has touched it. A cupboard door that seems, now and then, to strain gently against its latch. A dark corner that a person passes and finds, for no reason they can name, that they would rather not linger there. These are the quiet marks of a boggart settled in and dreaming, waiting without hurry for the moment it will be needed, or rather, for the moment it will be found. For a boggart does not truly need anything at all. It has no hunger, no plan, no wish to be discovered. It simply is what it is, folded into the dark, until a mind comes close enough to give it a shape to wear. And yet, for all that it wears the face of terror, the boggart is one of the least dangerous, frightening things in all the wizarding world. And this is the soft heart of its mystery. It has no true power to harm. It cannot bite in any lasting way, nor curse, nor truly wound. Its only strength is the fear it borrows, and that strength lives entirely inside the person who feels it. A boggart is frightening only for as long as one is frightened, and the moment the fear falters, so does the creature. This is why those who teach young witches and wizards how to face it teach them, above all, not to be alone when they meet it. A boggart grows confused when more than one person stands before it, for it cannot easily decide whose fear to become, and in that hesitation it wavers, half one shape and half another, and much of its power slips away. But the truest defense against a boggart is stranger and gentler still, and it is one of the loveliest small lessons the wizarding world has to offer. The spell that undoes it does not attack it or destroy it. It changes it. With the right word and the right turn of thought, a person can force the borrowed shape to become not more frightening, but absurd, so that the very thing they feared is suddenly made ridiculous, comic, impossible to dread. The towering figure trips over robes grown suddenly too long. The great spider finds itself sliding helplessly on wheels where its legs should grip. The cold and hooded shape becomes something silly and harmless. And when the person laughs, truly laughs, the boggart cannot bear it. Laughter is the one thing it has no answer for, because laughter is the opposite of fear, and a creature made entirely of fear simply cannot survive in its presence. It shrinks and spins and comes apart and is gone. There is something quietly wise hidden in all of this, worth turning over softly as the night deepens. The boggart teaches, without ever meaning to, that fear so often has no shape of its own at all. It borrows ours. The dread we carry into a dark room is mostly the dread we brought with us, dressed up in whatever form our own minds hand it. The thing in the wardrobe was nothing until we opened the door and gave it a face. And if fear is only a borrowed shape, then a shape is a thing that can be changed. It can be turned and lightened and made small, and even made to seem faintly ridiculous until it loses its hold and drifts apart into the dark it came from. No one knows where the first boggart came from, or how such a creature came to exist at all, a thing with no form until it is looked at, a mirror for the mind's oldest fears. It is one of the small, unanswered questions of the magical world, the kind that is never quite solved and never quite needs to be. Perhaps it grew, long ago, in some shut and shadowed place where fear had gathered thick, the way damp gathers in a corner. Perhaps it has always been part of the way the world is made, a reminder folded into the dark. What is certain is only what it does, and how easily, in the end, it is overcome, not by greater force, but by a lighter heart. And so, if you like, you may carry the smallest comfort of it with you as your thoughts begin to slow and soften tonight. Somewhere in the world, there is a creature that lives in cupboards and dark corners and becomes whatever we most fear. And it is defeated, again and again. Not by strength or by cleverness or by any great and difficult magic, but by the simple refusal to keep being afraid. The shapes it wears are only shapes, and they were always ours to change. The spider unravels. The tall, dark figure stumbles and shrinks. The cold thing warms and turns silly and falls away. And the room, which a moment ago seemed so full of dread, is once again only a room, quiet and ordinary and safe, with nothing in it after all but the soft dark and the gentle hush of a night settling down toward rest. Somewhere within the ancient walls of the great school of magic, along a stretch of corridor on the 7th floor that most people pass without ever noticing, there is a door that is not always there. For most of the time, the wall is only a wall, blank and bare, hung nearby with an old tapestry of a wizard trying, with little success, to teach a company of trolls to dance. A person could walk that passage 1,000 times and see nothing unusual. And then, on some other day, at some other hour, when a person walks that same stretch 3 times over with a true and pressing need held clear in their mind, a door will quietly appear where no door was before. It is the entrance to one of the deepest and most beloved mysteries of the castle, a place that has come to be called the Room of Requirement, and it is like nothing else in all the world of magic. The wonder of the room is that it is never quite the same room twice. It becomes whatever the one who needs it requires. To a person searching for a quiet place to hide, it becomes a hidden shelter. To a group wishing to practice their spells in secret, it becomes a wide and well-lit hall, lined with cushions and mirrors and everything they might need to learn. To someone caught in the corridor with no other refuge, it can become a simple room with a door that locks. It has offered chamber pots to those in sudden and undignified need. and it has offered vast and secret sanctuaries to those in far greater danger. It listens, in some way no one has ever fully explained, to the shape of a person's want, and then it answers. And when the need has passed and the person has gone, the door fades back into blank wall and the room folds away again into whatever quiet place it keeps itself, waiting for the next one who asks. There are small rules to it, or perhaps not rules so much as gentle limits that those who have used it have slowly come to learn. It cannot make food appear from nothing, for that is one of the deep boundaries of all magic, and so a person who needs to eat must still bring their meal with them. It answers most surely to a clear and honest need, and grows uncertain when the wish behind it is muddled or half-formed. And it is said that a person who does not know quite what they are looking for may find the room itself uncertain of what to become, opening onto some strange and unexpected place instead. But for a want held plainly and truly in the heart, the room almost never fails, and this is the quiet heart of its magic, that it asks only for honesty and answers with exactly what is required. No one knows who first made the room of requirement, or how the castle came to hold such a thing within itself. It is far older than anyone living, older than the memory of the school as most know it, woven so deeply into the stone that it seems less like a room that was built and more like a gift the castle has simply always had. Some who have studied it come to feel that the school itself is, in some gentle and half-sleeping way, aware, and that the room is the castle's quiet kindness, its way of caring for those who walk its halls, giving them what they need in the moment they need it, and asking nothing in return. Whether that is truly so, no book can say. It is one of the soft, unanswered questions that gather in old places, and it is perhaps lovelier left unanswered. But there is one particular shape the room can take that is stranger and more haunting than all the rest, and it is the one worth lingering over in the hush of the night. For if a person walks that corridor, needing not a place to do something, but simply a place to hide something, to put away and forget some object they cannot bear to keep and cannot bring themselves to destroy, then the room becomes something vast and dim and wondrous. It becomes the room of hidden things, and it is a place of quiet, dust-laden marvels beyond counting. Imagine a chamber as wide and as high as a cathedral, its ceiling lost in shadow far above, and stretching away in every direction, great towering heaps and alleyways and mountains of things, piled and stacked and leaning, a whole silent city, built entirely of what people have chosen to hide. For centuries upon centuries, the students of the school have come to this room to conceal the things they wished no one to find, and none of it was ever taken away. It only gathered, year upon year, generation upon generation, until the room grew into a vast and dusty labyrinth of the forgotten. There are old books hidden by those afraid of being caught reading them, and bottles concealed by those who should never have had them. There are broken wands, and battered furniture, and cages, and rusted armor, and the crowns and trinkets of students long since grown old and gone. There are treasures of true and ancient worth resting quietly beside worthless odds and ends, all of them equal now in the gray dust, all of them equally forgotten. To walk through that place is to walk through the secret history of the school itself, told not in words, but in objects. Every hidden thing was hidden by someone, once, for a reason that mattered to them in the moment they set it down. A gift they could not keep and could not return. A mistake they wished to bury. A treasure they meant to come back for and never did. A thing too painful to look at and too precious to throw away. Each object is a small and silent story, its ending long since lost, its owner most likely never to return. and the room holds them all without judgment, in the same patient hush, the dust settling softly and steadily over the years like the quietest kind of snow. It is a strange and gentle sort of place, this room of the lost and the put away, less frightening than melancholy, a great quiet memory the castle keeps on behalf of all who ever needed to forget. There is something deeply soothing, in the end, about the thought of such a room. So much of what troubles a person in the daytime is the weight of things they do not know where to put, the worries and regrets and small sharp memories that they cannot quite keep and cannot quite let go. And here is a place, imagined or real, that will simply take them and hold them, without asking anything, without demanding they be solved, letting them rest under a soft gray blanket of dust in a room as wide as the sky. Not thrown away, not lost forever, only set gently aside, somewhere safe, somewhere far off, where they can do no more harm and need no more thought. The room still waits, out along that quiet 7th-floor corridor, behind a wall that is only a wall until it is not. It has been many things to many people over the long life of the school, a shelter, a classroom, a hiding place, a haven in the worst of times. And in its deepest and dustiest form, it remains what it has always been, a keeper of hidden things. A vast and silent hall where the forgotten are allowed simply to be, undisturbed, at peace. You might picture it now, if it helps you toward rest, that great dim chamber stretching away into soft shadow, its towering quiet aisles, the gentle hush of dust settling over everything, and somewhere among it all a small clear space where you could set down whatever you have been carrying, and leave it there in the warm dark, and turn and walk away lighter into the deepening quiet of the night. Long before he became a name spoken with dread across the whole of the magical world, Gellert Grindelwald was only a bright and gifted young man, perhaps the most brilliant of his age. He had studied at a famous school of magic far to the east, a place of dark stone and older traditions. And even there, among students already remarkable, he shone so fiercely that his teachers could scarcely keep pace with him. His mind was quick and hungry and endlessly curious, reaching always toward the deeper and stranger corners of magic, the questions others were afraid even to ask. He was charming and beautiful and full of a restless fire, and to those who met him in those early days, he seemed less like an ordinary young wizard and more like a promise of something the world had not yet seen. Wherever he went, people were drawn to him, warmed and dazzled by the sheer brightness of him, and few could have imagined that so much light might one day cast so long a shadow. That is the first and saddest part of his mystery, that so much promise should have turned the way it did, and that so few, at the beginning, saw any sign of what was coming. When he was still young, he came for a time to a small and quiet village called Godric's Hollow, a gentle place of cottages and old graves and narrow lanes, where nothing of great consequence had happened in a very long while. He had been sent there to stay with a relative, and in the ordinary course of things his visit might have passed without note. But it was in that quiet village that he met another young man, just his own age, just as brilliant, just as hungry to understand the world. And the meeting of those two minds would come to shape the whole century that followed. For the other young man was Albus Dumbledore, who would one day be remembered as the greatest and gentlest wizard of his time, and who was then only a grieving and gifted boy, trapped by sorrow and duty in a life far too small for his gifts. The two of them recognized one another at once, the way that rare and lonely people sometimes do, each finding in the other the first true equal they had ever known. That summer, they were nearly inseparable. They talked for hours upon hours, late into the warm nights, sharing ideas that no one else around them could follow, or perhaps even bear to hear. They wrote long letters back and forth, even when they had only just parted, unable to let a thought rest until they had shared it. To two young men who had each felt, in their different ways, set apart from everyone around them, it must have seemed like a kind of miracle, this sudden closeness, this meeting of two flames, for a brief and shining, while they were, quite simply, the best of friends, and something even deeper than friends, bound by a bond that Dumbledore would carry, in sorrow, for the rest of his long life. But the ideas they shared that summer were not all bright ones, and here the mystery grows darker and more difficult to hold. Together the two young men dreamed of remaking the world. They spoke of a future in which those born with magic would step out from hiding and take their rightful place, no longer forced to conceal themselves, ruling gently, they told themselves, over those without magic, for the good of all. They gathered these dreams under a single phrase that Grindelwald would carry like a banner for the rest of his life, calling it the greater good, as though any cruelty might be forgiven so long as it was done in the name of some grand and distant benefit. It was a vision that sounded, in the mouths of two clever and idealistic boys, almost noble, almost kind. And that was exactly what made it so dangerous. They even dreamed of seeking out the three legendary hollows, the wand, the stone, and the cloak, believing that with such power in their hands, they might bend the whole world toward the shape they imagined for it. What no one has ever fully been able to explain is the precise moment or the precise reason that the two friends came apart, and that Grindelwald turned wholly toward the darkness, while Dumbledore turned away from it. There was a terrible quarrel, a sudden violent falling out that drew in Dumbledore's fragile younger sister, and in the chaos of it, a life was lost. And no one who was present ever fully explained afterward what had truly happened, or whose hand had done what. That single, unbearable moment shattered everything. Grindelwald fled the village and never returned, and Dumbledore was left with a grief and a guilt that would never entirely leave him. The friendship was over, the shared dream broken, and the two brightest young wizards of their age were set, from that day, upon opposite roads that would not meet again for many long and terrible years. Grindelwald went on to become exactly the thing his darkest dreams had pointed toward. He gathered followers and power, and eventually loosed a long shadow of fear and violence across much of the magical world, pursuing the same cold vision he and his friend had once whispered about together, now stripped of all its youthful softness and turned to open cruelty. He sought out the most powerful of the three legendary hollows, the unbeatable wand, and for a time he carried it, and with it he grew nearly untouchable, feared across many lands as few wizards had ever been feared before. And Dumbledore, who alone in all the world was his equal, who alone might have stopped him, held back for years, unwilling to face the friend he had loved, afraid of what a meeting between them might reveal about that long-ago night and his own part in it. It was only at the very last, when there was no other choice remaining, that the two of them at last faced one another, and the greatest of all their duels finally came, a contest spoken of ever after in hushed and wondering tones, and the shadow was broken at last. What makes Grindelwald so haunting a figure, more than any of the horrors he caused, is that he was never simply a monster. He began as a boy of extraordinary gifts, capable of great warmth and great friendship, loved deeply by the best man of his age. The canon never fully answers the questions that gather around him. It never tells us exactly what turned so much promise toward ruin, whether it was some flaw he carried from the beginning, or the intoxication of his own brilliance, or the belief, so quietly poisonous, that a beautiful enough end could justify any means at all. It leaves those questions open, the way real questions about real people so often remain open, and asks us only to sit with the sorrow of them. For his is, in the end, a story less of wickedness than of waste. A light that might have warmed the world was turned instead to burning it, and the one person who might have called him back was the very one his fall drove away. Even at the last, there were signs, or so it is quietly suggested, that something of the boy he had been was not entirely gone. Some flicker of regret for what had been lost that summer in Godric's Hollow, when two young men had dreamed together of a better world and had not yet learned how easily such dreams can turn. And so, his name endures not only as a warning, but as a kind of sadness, the sorrow of what might have been a bright thing gone dark. It is a heavy thought, and yet a strangely gentle one to rest upon. This reminder that even the deepest shadows once began as light, and were loved, and are, in the end, more to be mourned than feared, as the night draws softly in and the old sorrows settle into quiet. And so, at the end of this long wandering through the darkest and quietest corners of the wizarding world, we come at last to the deepest mystery of them all, the one that lies beneath every other, softer and stranger and gentler than any we have touched so far. It is the mystery of death itself, and of the quiet truth that waits, in the end, at the close of every story. All the shadows we have walked among tonight have circled around this one still center. The archway hung with its whispering veil was a door into it. The pale sleepers beneath the black lake were a refusal of it. The torn and scattered soul of a frightened wizard was one long, terrible attempt to escape it. And the three legendary gifts, the wand and the stone and the cloak, were, in the oldest telling, offered by the figure of death himself to three brothers who met him on a lonely road at dusk. Think back gently over all of it now, the way you might look back over a long day just before sleep. The cold creatures that fed on happiness, and the shining shield of memory that held them off. The serpent that slept 1,000 years beneath a school. The girl whose magic turned inward, and the mirror that showed the heart's deepest wish, and the horses that only the grieving could see. In nearly every one of these, at the very root of the fear, there was the same old shadow. The fear of ending, the fear of loss, the fear of what lies beyond the last door of all. So much of the darkness in the world of magic, and perhaps in every world, grows from that single ancient dread. And it was against exactly that dread that the darkest wizard of the age set himself, tearing his own soul again and again into fragments, hidden in a cup, a locket, a ring, a diadem, a serpent, a cave by the sea, all in a desperate refusal to ever let himself end. He feared death so terribly that he made himself into something less than living in order to flee it, and in fleeing it, he lost everything that had made him a person at all. But there was another way of meeting that same mystery, and it is the one worth carrying with you into the quiet now. For the wisest wizard of that time, who had faced his own long share of grief and guilt and loss, came to understand death not as an enemy to be fought and escaped, but as something else entirely, something almost kind. He taught, in his gentle way, that to the well-ordered mind, death is only the next great adventure, the last and largest of all journeys, nothing to be dreaded and nothing to be fled. He believed that it was only the frightened who truly feared it, those who clung so hard to what they had that they could not bear to imagine letting go, and that there were, in truth, far worse things in the world than the ending of a life well and fully lived. He did not chase the hollows to conquer death, as Grindelwald once had dreamed of doing. He came, at the last, to accept it, and in that acceptance, he found a peace that no amount of power had ever given his old friend. There is a gentleness in that idea that is easy to overlook when death is spoken of only in fear. For if death is truly the next great adventure, then it is not a thing that takes from us so much as a thing that carries us onward, the way sleep carries us out of a long and tiring day into somewhere softer. The wisest wizard understood that a person who has loved fully and lived fully and given what they had to give need not cling in terror to the edge of their own life. They may let go when the time comes, gently, the way a hand at last unclenches, and find that what waited on the other side was never the horror they had imagined, but only a deeper and kinder quiet. It was the ones who could not love, who had nothing to hold to but their own fear, for whom the ending was most terrible, because they had made of their whole lives a desperate grasping, and had nothing left to rest upon at the last. And there is one image, above all others, that gathers all these threads together and holds them softly, and it is a fitting place to let the mind come to rest. When the boy at the heart of the whole long tale walked at last into the forest to meet his own ending, unafraid, holding the resurrection stone that called the forms of those he had loved to walk beside him through the dark, he did not find horror waiting on the other side. He found, instead, a vast and quiet place, still and pale and full of a soft light, a place that was neither wholly of the living nor wholly of the dead, but somewhere gently between. It was calm there, and warm and unhurried. Nothing hurt. Nothing was to be feared. It was a resting place, a threshold, a great white hush where a weary traveler might pause and gather himself, and where the oldest and kindest of his teachers waited to speak with him one last time, gently, as one waking friend might speak to another. And what he came to understand in that still bright place is the softest truth this whole long night has been circling toward. That death, so long dressed up as the darkest of all mysteries, is in truth perhaps the least frightening of them all. That it is not a wall, but a doorway. Not an ending so much as a turning. Not a thing that hunts us, but a thing that waits, patient and quiet, the way rest waits at the end of a long day. All the fear we have walked among tonight, the cold and the shadows and the whispering veil, was only ever the fear of the dark, before we understood it, and when it is understood, when it is looked at softly and without dread. The way you might study a strange old shape in a dim room and slowly realize it is only a coat upon a chair, the darkness grows smaller and gentler, and at last becomes only a quiet, and the quiet becomes only rest. So let the last of the shadows loosen now and drift away. Let the cave by the sea grow still, its lake dark and calm. Let the whispering archway stand quiet in its empty room. Let the cold creatures sink back into the distance, held off forever by the warm and shining memory of everything you have ever loved. There is nothing left in any of it to fear. It was only ever a story, told slowly in the dark, so that each old dread could grow smaller and softer as it passed, until it was nothing more than a shape you could change, and then nothing more than a memory, and then nothing at all but the gentle weight of your own breathing, slow and even, in a warm and darkened room. You have wandered a long way tonight, through 1,000 years of secrets and shadows, and now the journey is done, and there is nowhere further you need to go. All the mysteries can keep. They have waited centuries already, and they will wait, patient and untroubled, while you rest. You do not need to solve any of them. You do not need to hold any of them. You may simply set them down, one by one, like small stones laid gently in a still pool, and feel yourself grow lighter as each one sinks softly out of sight. There is only the warm dark now, and the deep, slow tide of your own quiet breathing carrying you down, gently and without any fear at all, into the softest and least frightening mystery of them all, which is nothing more than sleep, waiting for you now, kind and quiet and near, ready to take you down into its warm and dreamless deep, slowly, softly, all the way down into rest. And so we come, softly, to the end of the journey, though not to the end of the mysteries themselves, for some of these old questions were never truly answered, only carried gently into the dark and left there to rest. Tonight, we sat with the cold creatures that draw the warmth from every happy thought, and with the ancient archway that whispers though no wind ever reaches it. We looked upon the pale sleepers beneath the black lake, and wondered at the tale of 3 brothers and the quiet figure who met them on the road. We considered a soul torn again and again by the worst magic ever made, and a stone that calls the dead back only halfway home. We walked past the serpent that slept 1,000 years beneath a school, and among the patient trees that watch and wait. We remembered a girl whose magic turned inward, a mirror that shows the deepest wish of the heart, and a small cold locket that learned to whisper. We spoke of a man whose soul was drawn away, an island where hope cannot live, and the dark horses only the grieving can see. We watched a fire that hunts like a living thing, a cave that feeds on despair, and a fear that wears whatever shape it is shown. We passed the room that hides what must be hidden, the bright boy who came to love the dark, and at last the quiet truth that waits, without menace, at the end of every story. There is nothing left now that you must carry, and nothing here that requires an answer from you. Let each of these old, frightening things grow smaller as it drifts away, down through still dark water, softer and fainter until only calm remains. You are safe. You are warm. None of these mysteries can touch you, and none of them ask anything of you at all. Let your breathing slow, and let the last of the day dissolve like mist over a quiet lake. Good night. If these old shadows carried you gently toward rest, come back to us again, and let a soft subscribe keep them coming. There are many more long, slow tales, and many more mysteries waiting patiently for the nights ahead.